Hello, ladies and gentlemen. If you're anything like us, you are sleeping off the old turkey blues from Thanksgiving. We sure hope you all had a fantastic holiday filled with family and friends. We're still shaking off our own slumber from the post football, post turkey day itself. A lot of traveling going on, a lot of family time going on. So we took a week off and hope you all enjoy this retro episode we'll put out for you today. We'll call it the 16-bit era. We're going to go back and talk about our favorite Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis games. These are edited from previous episodes, so you perhaps have seen this before, but perhaps not. Might also be interesting to see the Super Nintendo list compared to the Sega list back to back, if you're interested in that. Or if you joined us later as a newer fan to our podcast, these will be new to you as well. So, we'll return next week live, recorded in studio at our houses. And we'll have a brand new topic for all of you then as the hosts get back together and talk about another wonderful things where they mostly disagree on things. Friends occasionally not disagreeing. The Fawn Pod, the Fawncast. Enjoy this mega episode for all of you out there this week. Also, stay tuned for some more James Bond playthrough with Cody. Have a good one. Bye. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing.
I disagree.
Son of a... All right. Tonight we are headed back to the video game genre, I suppose, or medium maybe is a better word here. And we're going to talk about the top 5 SNES, or is it SNES? Oh, we're going to start that debate again. Super Nintendo Entertainment System games. And this is, to make sure we clarify here, this is very subjectively chosen our top 5 SNES games, not what is objectively the best 5 SNES games, although maybe someone's list will, in fact, look like some other lists that are out there. I don't know. We shall see. So we'll let everybody introduce themselves here. I'm Cody with you again.
I'm Blue.
I'm Brett.
FDM, or Matt, if you would like.
If you would like. All right. So we thought we'd start as our usual format here, just kind of a little experience ourselves with this topic, with the SNES. So I didn't actually bother to look up the dates, but we're probably talking like, what, 92, 91, 92, 93, somewhere in there. Does that sound about right?
I believe it came out in 90, maybe 91. I'd have to look.
Maybe
I got
91.
mine in 91, I think. But
okay.
I think 2 years, 1.5 or 2 years after the Sega Genesis came out, which was 1989.
Okay.
And 1991 in North America, it says.
91. And this was also, and Nintendo still does this, so do the other companies, but there was also overlap here, right? Because the NES was still around for a little while, spit out kind of like that last batch of games while the SNES was kind of becoming the dominant platform here. So for me, this was, I had a friend who had the SNES before I did, and was not a particularly close friend. I'd almost say more of an acquaintance. And I stayed the night at his house just simply to play the SNES one time, and we played, I think, Ninja Turtles 4. Did that come out for the SNES? Turtles in Time? I think we played that. Yep. And probably some other games as well after that. But I didn't get mine until, I don't know if it was a Christmas present or when I got mine, but I had a lot of fun with it. I think mine came with the Super Mario World, I want to say, was the edition I had. Yeah. Which I think a lot of the early ones probably had. But to me, it was just neat with the kind of advanced technology going from the Nintendo to the Super Nintendo, with the graphics getting better and the ability to do more, shading or kind of like, I don't know, texture effects, I guess. I don't know what the technical term would be, but kind of like the game has started to seem a little more detailed. Realistic's probably not the right word for what they were showing here on the SNES, but you could definitely tell it was a jump up from the Nintendo, and especially those early systems, probably up to like what, the N64, I think. There was all the hype of like, this is how many bits this system is. Oh my God, you won't believe it. And they doubled it, man. They doubled it. So there was that part of it too. And then I think by the next generation after that, people were like, man, it's not really how you measure it anymore, I guess. So Yeah, but I have just a lot of fond memories of SNES playing different games with different friends of mine that I can recall through different eras of my life, and a lot of good memories with the SNES. So I'll let somebody else tell their memories here.
Well, a second ago, I don't remember precisely when we got our Super Nintendo. It what I do remember most about it is that it was our parents bought us the original Nintendo system because we were only 5 and 6, my brother and I. And but when the Super Nintendo came out, we had a bit of an allowance. We were already like kind of working on the farm at that point, and like we actually were like getting some pay. We weren't just like slave labor for our parents. And I remember that we had to pay, like, I think it was like half of it. Our parents agreed to like pay half of it, and my brother and I had to pony up the other half. I don't think it wasn't to the point yet where our parents made us sell the other system. Like that came later. Like we couldn't keep old systems. Like we had to like get rid of one to get a new one, which was terribly sad, but tragic. So I don't remember precisely when in the cycle I got my Super Nintendo, but I did put a lot of time into it. One of the games that I really kind of stands out to me is the first Griffey baseball game. We had my brother and I and our neighbor who makes our closest neighbor. It wasn't like, it was just down the road a bit. We would stay up for hours, like way past our bedtime, just playing that game like over and over and over again. A lot of other games too, but that was just kind of really sticks out for me a bit. It definitely, I went from the original Nintendo to the Super Nintendo. I did buy the Genesis after the Super Nintendo, even though it came out earlier chronologically. So I did start to like split my game time between the two systems, at some point. But I do have a lot of fond memories of the Super Nintendo.
Can I ask a dumb question? You said
go
you
ahead.
had to give up your old system when you got a new one. Were you able to keep both the Super Nintendo and the Genesis at the same time?
Yes, I did. We did have that. I think it was
Okay.
It was
Okay.
like
That's good.
like from the 64 on, my parents were like, all right, if you're going to buy a new system, you got to get rid of some of these old ones.
Oh,
Yeah.
I guess since I started talking, I'll just go on. I guess like the Super Nintendo going. Unless are you still going? Still going?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I would just define it as the first system I was really actually, and probably the last system I was just really excited about a system coming out because, we had Nintendo Power Magazine and they showed us like scenes of like Link to the Past and Mario World and all these essentially upgraded versions of games that we already knew and loved. Final Fantasy II, which I later find is Final Fantasy IV. But yeah, all those, like you see pictures of them, and I was just like waiting for that thing to come out. And looking at the timeline, I probably got mine actually in 92, not 91, as I previously said, because I got it for my birthday, which it would have had to have been 92, which makes sense. I think I was in 8th grade when I got it, 7th or 8th grade, something like that. I don't know what else to have to say about it. It's still my favorite system because it's the style of game doesn't change. They just get a little bit better. Like Super Metroid is Metroid, just better. Link to the Past is Zelda, just better. I don't know. It doesn't change like the way I have to think about gaming. It's just the controllers, the same controller, but better. I even got one of these suckers that I use for games on the computer. So Super Nintendo controller. I'm really happy with it.
Those look like it have joysticks on it though.
It does, but that doesn't bother me. It's just added on there. I guess that's about all I have to say. I remember getting that sucker and just like being really excited about finally having it. Like that was the system for me.
Yeah, I guess I can go. So I actually didn't own a Super Nintendo until 2013. Not to say I don't have any experience with that, I just never owned one. So I'm one of the few ones who, well, I guess, sure, Brett, we both had Genesis at the same time, but my first console was actually Sega Master System. And so we, it did not do well in the United States. If people aren't even familiar, it was a thing, but it was an 8-bit system. And so we had that. And then actually my parents bought NES when I think I was probably like 4 or 5, and got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. And so never really, we had that. And then we switched to Genesis when Sonic came out. And so when that whole blast processing campaign came, and, it was definitely a capstone moment in probably like the 90s gaming culture. We were pretty firmly like having Sega, and, I never felt like I engaged in the console war and like one was better than the other. I just, played what we had. But I did have a friend down the street who had Super Nintendo, and I pretty much remembered playing either NBA Jam, Super Mario World, and I think Turtles in Time. So kind of those were the 3 ones. And I think there's one other time where I went to another friend's house and we played Ken Griffey and Street Fighter. But, very surface level understanding of what the Super Nintendo did until explored a little bit more in the 2010s. Is that how we refer to that decade? The 10s?
Yeah, I guess that's a confusing one.
I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah. So that's my perspective so far.
I'm still calling it last decade.
Yeah.
That works. Well,
yes.
It's not. Well, yeah, I guess it would be.
Let's disagree about this. Subvert the topic.
I was really hoping you were going to say I hadn't played the Super Nintendo until or I hadn't gotten one until like this week for the episode. And I was like, awesome. But that was not the case. All right. Well, before we get into the list, I guess maybe this has kind of been touched on a bit, but I just thought it'd be worth mentioning, at least from the Nintendo advertisement side, if nothing else. They tried to tout some of these newer technological breakthroughs that they had with the Super Nintendo, as far as things that games could do that they previously couldn't do. So I was just looking through here, and I know there's a couple of these, but they have the they have a couple things here to talk about, I guess. So we had the Super FX chip, which is kind of what let games like Star Fox be possible, where it was kind of like that 3D world, even though you were more or less playing on like a 2-dimensional system at the time still. So that was kind of different.
They also had, I don't know what it was called, but they had the ability to rotate and zoom in and out of sprites. They did that a lot.
Talking about Mode 7, right? This is what the technological feature, right?
I knew something was called Mode 7, so if that's what that is,
that's
then
probably what it's used in. Like a ton of, like you can see, you're like, oh, I'm playing a Super NES game because they're rotating the screen.
Yeah. Like Super Castlevania was
exactly
good example.
Comes right to mind. Pilot Wings, a whole bunch.
So they were trying to, you could see here, especially as the lifespan went on for this system, they were trying to tweak what they could get out of it, especially as far as what the games could do. And then, obviously the leap after this is going to be the 64 for Nintendo. So that's going to be basically the advent of 3D gaming for Nintendo, right? Like that's when they kind of jumped full into that. We also had the controller, which Matt just kind of showed, which was basically the Nintendo controller, but with shoulder pads, and then also X and Y added to it. So more buttons you could press. And this was, do you remember there was definitely a time when like you play video games and I felt like it was like a badge of honor for the system to have like more buttons than the previous one or their competitors? Like now it has 37 buttons. But I guess now they do. I mean, now there's a ton of buttons on them anyway. But what else do we have here? We had the Super Game Boy attachment for the SNES, which allowed you to put Game Boy games in and play them on your SNES.
I'd forgotten about that, though.
I
had it
with color palettes, no less.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Brett, you had this. Always mystified me. It probably was not a big deal to you, but I remember going to your house. Anytime I would go there, you had the Mario Paint with the mouse.
Yeah,
I was like, "This is amazing!" Like a mouse.
Never really caught on with anything else, but it was amazing for one game.
Yeah, I can stamp a Mario. Woo! Let's see what else we had here. Game Genie. That was still around at that time. We had.
I feel like we can't not mention probably like a page right out of Gunpei Yokoi's textbook in terms of how he did more with less for hardware, but late into the life with Donkey Kong Country and the animation style and how they really pushed the Super Nintendo to its limits. Yeah, I forget the technical specifications, but yeah, that's like a feather in Nintendo's hat there.
That is the most depressing story about somebody, the story of Gunpei Yokoi. Like, what happens to him is so friggin' sad.
Elucidate us.
He then developed a Virtual Boy, was kind of ousted out of Nintendo in shame, and then died in a car accident.
Oh, carrying on. All right then. Yes, okay. Let's see. Japan, I guess, had a modem attachment, which I did not know about. That connected to a radio station, lasted for 5 years, and you could play remakes or sequels to older games, apparently. I did not know about that. All right, and then at the end, we should also put the historical footnote in here. Of course, we had the Super NES CD-ROM prototype. Dun, dun, dun.
Which became what?
Which became the rival.
Sony PlayStation.
So, oh, goodness. All right, what else do we have here? Finishing up, let's see. I'm just kind of paraphrasing again from websites here. We have 49 million consoles sold, which says it was the best-selling console of its era, but those numbers are really not that high compared to the bigger end systems I know today. That's about it. Yeah, I don't know. So it felt different to me to play on it. I don't know if it was the controller or just the improved graphics or what the case was, but it felt more modern than the NES. You could definitely tell. I guess I'd ask, well, Blue, if you had the Master System, and then Hudson, I guess I know you had at least one of the Ataris, right? Did you have multiple gens?
We had an Atari 2600 and Nintendo, a TurboGrafx 16, and a Super NES at the time.
So I guess what I'm getting at here is I had an Atari. I don't know which one it was, probably 26, and I also had an Odyssey, I believe, back in the day for a little while. But like in terms of a system or a company that you kind of stayed with, this was the first one that had the new jump to the next generation, that I really paid attention to and cared about. So to me, this was a pretty big deal that like there was the new version of this thing that I loved coming out. But for you two, just kind of for comparison's sake here, was it like that when like the Genesis came out for you, Blue?
Yeah, I'd say the Master System. Yeah, we really liked that, and then I definitely was really excited to get the Genesis. And I think in just hindsight, I can't say that I necessarily prefer one or the other, but I think I've conceded that the console war was great, but clearly the Super Nintendo was the better of the two consoles. And a couple of reasons, which I think we can jump into further. But yeah, I think ultimately I loved the Genesis. I thought it was cool. And, you were mentioning the leap from 8 to 16-bit and how much of a technical feat that was. And basically, at the time, you had arcade equivalent ports. I'm thinking of examples like Altered Beast and Shinobi being like pretty popular arcade games, and then being able to have that technology in home was huge. And so I don't know if that was a perspective of you, but yeah. Or another example of like 8-bit, like just being able to play the Turtles arcade game at home, is just amazing to me.
It continues though. What were they thinking?
Yeah, I don't know. What, Sega?
No, for the Turtles arcade game, you only got 2 continues to beat the whole game. That's crazy. You just need to be able to keep putting quarters in.
Yeah, or try to get the Konami code at the very half of a second you have at the title screen.
That's the way to do it. Well, I think you mentioned 2 other things in there too, Blue, that are interesting. One is, as the games at home began to get better, I kind of wonder if this was the generation that maybe really pushed a lot of arcades into some financial trouble, because you could play a lot of the things at home that you could get, why it's, plunk down $100 in quarters at the arcade if you could buy the same game for $50 at home.
Yeah, that and the other piece is just like PC gaming, I think, is just on the tertiary here, and it isn't I think from the NES era to probably the beginning of the 90s, I think it was basically at the point where id started getting in the mix and John Carmack figured out how to actually program computer software. There wasn't much leap in terms of how PC gaming was compared to console gaming. And I think alongside those, you're talking about arcades and clearly much stronger technical processors and graphics processors versus a home console, which really will be constrained as soon as it's manufactured.
Yeah, boy, it's just making me think of more and more things here too. But I guess we should also mention, we kind of have beaten around the actual verbiage of this, but the Super Nintendo Genesis war was huge, just in terms of everything: advertisement, games, who had the better Aladdin game versus who had the better Lion King game, or whatever the case was. But that's I know the generation like after this, when PlayStation's evolved too, was maybe like the height of the kind of advertisement and fanboy rivalry. I don't know. Nowadays I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of people are like, I have an Xbox and I have a PlayStation and I might have a Nintendo Switch also. But this was definitely like a, Sega does what Nintendo don't type era. Like it was smacking each other down like the old Coke and Pepsi ads when they were going at it for a while.
For me specifically, at the time, what it was what games did they offer? I wanted to play adventure games that aren't necessarily level based. I wanted to play RPGs. I wanted to play Metroidvania type stuff. And frankly, there was a lot more of that for the Super Nintendo. Now, when Sega kind of took up a lot of that, I did get a 64, but I really shouldn't have. I really should have got a PlayStation because they had the Final Fantasy games. They had Symphony of the Night. They had all that stuff, and I should have gone that route instead. But, that's why I always was under the impression as a kid that Genesis was more the sports game console, and I didn't have as much interest in sports games, so that's why I didn't.
Yeah, they had the big EA Sports contract that pumped out everything.
That's why I had an
every
impression
sport, every year.
Yeah, 95, 96, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
I used to like Electronic Arts back when they made computer games in the 80s, but now it seems that's all they do.
Well, yeah, that'd be a whole nother topic. We're talking to ones that have.
Sorry.
No. I mean, it's not. I'm just saying.
Sorry.
Either way. Okay. Well, any last comments before we jump into our top? Well, let's do honorable mentions first here. Does anybody else have any comments before we start with those? All right. Well, we kind of are going to run this. If you did join us for, what was the one we ranked? Was it the NES episode, the top 5 NES? So we're going to kind of run this similar for our listeners out there. Each person's going to get roughly 2 minutes-ish to spend as they would like talking about their honorable mentions, whether that is fond memories of 1 or 2 games that they want to go into more detail on, or if they just have a large list they want to try to read through, whatever they want to do with their 2 minutes. And then we'll go on to our number 5 games across the board, and then 4 and so on up to the top. And we'll go from there. So honorable mentions. Okay. Let's see here. Well, I'll start, I guess. How about that? So my honorable mentions, I came up with a list of about 20 games for this podcast, and I trimmed it down to 15 that probably have a little more memory for me here. So I'm going to kind of run through some of these early ones quick. 15, I have Saturday Night Slam Masters, an obscure wrestling game, but was really fun. Very arcadey graphics. Number 14, I have Super Smash TV, which I had really good times playing with friends through all the stages on. That was one of those early, I don't know if it was a launch title, but it had to be pretty close. 13 is the weird game Populous, which I had where you were basically God and raised in lowered land and tried to complete some objective. I couldn't tell you what the hell the objective was, but I had fun playing the game. It was something. Number 12, I have Super Punch-Out, which I have always loved all the Punch-Out games. Number 11, here's a surprise for people, Super Metroid, down at number 11 on my list, which I love the series also. Number 10, Donkey Kong Country, which, as Blue mentioned, the graphics were just fantastic at the time. Gameplay was really tight. Could you play that one 2-player? The first one? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if you played 2-player, if Donkey Kong got slapped or something, the other player would become Diddy Kong if you had an option.
Oh, yeah.
If you had him, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's right, because you had to get him. All right, number 9, F-Zero, which I famously remember I bought with Kool-Aid points. So those were the good old days. But a lot of time spent on F-Zero trying to beat certain times on certain tracks, and really like that series. Hint, Nintendo. Hint. Number 8, Harvest Moon, which I randomly rented at a video game shop in Roger City and bought the copy they had there, and then later sold it for much more than I bought it for. So a farming sim. Who doesn't like a good farming sim, though? Good times. Number 7, I have NBA Jam Tournament Edition, which is probably a little better than the original one, but fantastic 2-player gameplay. Played a lot of games of that with people through the years. And then my number 6, just missing here, last second switch, is Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Comes in at number 6 on my list. Great gameplay, good story, good graphics, great world building, good levels. There we go. All right, so that's my honorable mentions. Let's go to... That's already starting to make fun of my list here. Let's go to Hudson. What do you have for your honorables?
Probably, I'm guessing that some of my honorables will make it on your list, and because some of your honorables will make it on mine. But I'm going to start with SimCity. Just had a lot of fun with that game. Great music, great. It's just a lot of fun. I just remember I don't remember how to do it, but there's a code where you can get max money really early on. And I found the game unplayable unless you did it. But then again, I was in 7th or 8th grade. So, past that, there's two fighting games I got to put on the list, and that's Mortal Kombat 2 and Street Fighter 2. They're both great. And I'm talking any incarnation of the Street Fighter 2. I mean, they're really all the same. I guess if I had to pick one, I'd say Super, but I don't know. They're just good. There's a big continuing tournament that will never get finished. That's a story for another time.
Oh, it'll get finished.
Next, a weird one I want to mention is Clay Fighter, just because that's the first time I ever played a game and it sang to me. We turn on the game, or just listening to the music, and all of a sudden you hear Clay Fighter, Clay Fighter, and we're like, holy shit, the game's singing to us. Out of This World has just an amazing look to it. I wish the game were more playable. I mean, it is playable, but it has the controls of something like a Dragon Slayer for the arcade. And it's really hard, but it has a great look and a great story. And that Running from the Beast music is freaking amazing. Another game with great music is Gradius 3. Love that soundtrack from beginning to end. Another honorable mention has to be Pilot Wings. Super Punch-Out, those two are both very good NES games. Earthbound is amazing. I played that maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Finally, a kid in college made me start playing it, and I finally he's like, okay, if you finish that, and this is 15 years later, I will take you to dinner. So I finally sat down and played it, finished it, and then we went out for Ethiopian food. It was great.
Wow, so you paid up on it, huh?
Yeah. And then the last 4 that I have to mention really briefly, Final Fantasy 4, which is 2, 5, which is the first game I ever got into emulation for, because when 7 came out, I wasn't very excited about it, but what that made me realize is that what I knew as 3 was actually 6. So there's some missing games in here, folks. So I had to figure out what was going on. So I found a copy of Final Fantasy 5 that was translated by fans and played it on emulation. It was great. Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana also on that list. Great soundtracks, great games. The problem with those is it's really tough at our ages to sit down and play a game like that. It really is. Chrono Trigger is at least mercifully short. Secret of Mana is not too bad, I suppose, but they just got great stories, and the music for those games is amazing. There's some wonderful orchestrated versions of that stuff too, but I think that's, last but not least, Star Trek Starfleet Academy. My friend and I used to hook it up to 2 TVs and block off the top and block off the bottom of each TV so that we couldn't see each other, and we'd do the Starfleet duel thing. That was so much fun.
Nice.
I always lost because I was terrible at it. Terrible.
Wait, what did you do? You blocked the TV? So you can only
okay, imagine you're playing GoldenEye. You hook GoldenEye up to 4 TVs, and then you literally block off the screen so you only saw your corner. So you couldn't just look at what other people are doing. Because in that game you could cloak. You could put on a clicking device, and like, oh, I can see that they're looking right at me, but
Yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. All right. Let's head to let's see. We'll go to Brett next.
All right. Well, a few similar games that have been mentioned already. In no particular order here, I had Harvest Moon, which it was a game I loved playing. Because I just couldn't get enough farming in my actual reality life, so went and farmed in digital as well. Though I'm certain I never finished that game. I probably started it dozens of times. It's just a fun game. Just sit and chill and just do your daily chores and stuff. But was that NBA Jam was just super cool because it's a basketball game, but it gets crazy. Like dunking from the half court line and hitting like 70-point 3-pointers and just craziness happening. And also had SimCity because 11-year-old doesn't love like city management. But it was really fun. I definitely was very basic compared to what you can do now with SimCity games, but still it was very cool and enjoyable. F-Zero, I really enjoyed it. I think it was the first game I played that the speed of it felt like intoxicating. It was like, wow, I'm moving fast here, and it just was really cool. And I mentioned earlier Griffey Baseball, Major League Baseball. The first one. We paid, my brother and I and our friend across the street, we put so many hours in that game, and it was just really, we do like seasons, and just like a side note, it was just funny because all the players in the game had like real stats of what their real life counterparts were, but all the names, they couldn't use actual player names except for Griffey himself. That's right. And so he had like all these crazy, like one, for example, like all the Red Sox was all what was it? Crap, now I'm forgetting it. But it was all like famous Boston stuff.
Yeah, I think they were like presidents and founding father type people.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Revolutionary people. Yeah.
So that was just fun. And a game that I actually wanted to put in my top 5, though when I started thinking about it more, I was like, I enjoy this game, but I don't remember much of anything about it. So I can't really put it in my top 5. It didn't really stick in my head that well. But Breath of Fire was probably the first really big RPG that I played. And at that age, I still wasn't like really hooked into RPGs. Like, though it was just like a couple of years after that, I started getting like really into them. I really love those. But Breath of Fire I enjoyed a lot. But like I said, I can't tell you much about it other than your character turns into a dragon, which was awesome.
Spoiler, jeez.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And then coming in at 6th, like Cody, I would Link to the Past.
Ooh.
It was a game that was really fun, and it was honestly, it's probably like the best game for the Super Nintendo. But for me personally, that's not in my favorite list. It was very enjoyable, and the graphics were great, and the sound and everything. It just didn't quite hook me as some other games. So
yeah, I definitely feel you. You mentioned F-Zero. Like I was just trying to remember back to, you said it felt super fast. Like it did feel like that game was flying, and that had to be another one that used that mode 7 thing we just talked about, right? Because like you don't actually turn the spaceships. I'm
going to get into that. I will get into that. That's my speech. That's my speech later on.
Yes. All right. I'm trying to steal your thunder here. Okay, Blue, honorable mentions.
Okay, so here I'll preface by mine, just because I literally did not play most of these on my list until, actually within the past decade. So a lot of these were like have the benefit of history of games that, like, for example, define the system of, as I'm exploring the Super Nintendo, really just get to do without like preconceived notions of nostalgia or, other people's nostalgia that I get to benefit from necessarily. But I have a few more. I'm not going to be redundant because I think a lot of these have been mentioned, but couple that haven't been. So, for example, UN Squadron, really cool shoot 'em up. It has like RPG elements to it, made by Capcom. Pretty sweet. Surprisingly, you haven't mentioned it yet, but Super Mario RPG, the Square and Nintendo mashup, pretty cool. Isometric graphics. Best thing to compare it to, it's not the same genre, but like Sonic 3D Blast, when they started to get into those isometric 3D on the 16-bit, thought that was really neat. Kirby's Dream Course, really, really cool, like golf game that I never thought about, but you punt Kirby around and try to get him in a hole. Pretty great. Other pieces people have already mentioned, Secret of Mana, Super Metroid's up there for me is on this list. So these aren't in particular order. Gradius 3 has been mentioned. Donkey Kong Country, that series, I'd say that's not in the top 5, but up there. And then I'm going to put Super Castlevania 4 just down there. Like, I think it's fantastic, but it's not in my top 5. And then some Konami mentions here. I think one, I think these are really interesting because Konami actually put these same games back and forth, just had to do different ports based on the hardware. But Turtles in Time is there for me. On the Genesis, it was called Hyperstone Heist, and there actually was a difference between both games. Hyperstone Heist had different levels compared to the Super Nintendo. And also, I think it was just really interesting. I think the Super Nintendo had a better sound chip, at least for that. Like for the Street Fighter games, those are clear ports from back and forth. I think ultimately, like Super Nintendo ports from Konami tended to be a little bit better than the ones I played and grew up with on Genesis. So with that, Turtles in Time, but then I think just fantastic game overall. Zombies Ate My Neighbors, like a B terror movie, but it's got basically everything that you would love. Chucky dolls, Jason, hockey masks, and obviously zombies, and lots of levels. Co-op is one of those ones that's just top-down view, and you get to run through the game and have different power-ups and weapons. So that kind of just rounds out my honorable mention list. And plus one, I think mostly all the other ones I've played that you've all mentioned, I enjoy them, but they're just not on the top 5 for me.
Fair. I always wanted to play Zombies Ate My Neighbors. I never played it.
It's wonderful, and you should.
Is it like what? Go ahead.
You should be disappointed that you haven't.
My impression was that is the gameplay similar to like Fester's Quest for the NES?
Yeah, I mean, but Fester's Quest is horrible, whereas Zombies Ate My Neighbors is actually quite polished, But yeah, you're right. Like top down view, able to move in a X and Y axis. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's get to our big ones here then. Top 5. I suspect we'll probably have some repeats or some re-mentions here as we continue on. So do we want to rotate, or you just want to keep the same order and go through that way? Maybe that's less confusing. I don't know. We'll just maybe try it that way. So, all right. So I'll go number 5. All right. Let's do that then. I think we switched it last time and that got a little more confusing, but let's try it this way straight up. So I'll just keep the same order here and we'll go through. My number 5 is a really obscure game, actually. Maybe one or two of you would have played this, but it was called Super Mario World. Yeah. This was a rare import made in Africa. I'm just joking. Obviously, this was the packing game, but I love this. It felt so different than the earlier Mario games, I thought, in terms of gameplay. I guess Mario 3 was kind of headed in that direction. But for whatever reason, I like Mario 3 quite a bit. I don't love it as much as other people do. But this one was neat because simply I like the fact that the map would change as you would find the different exits, and then like suddenly a new ladder would sprout up or trees would come down. There'd be a new path. And I also really liked the fact that not all, but a lot of the stages had multiple exits you could find. So there was like a little element of hidden things that were in there, especially the ghost houses in particular, because there'd always be like a super hidden exit somewhere if you could manage to find it. A lot of this I did on my own. There might have been one or two stages maybe where I had to consult like a Nintendo Power. I don't think I ever had a walkthrough book, like a strategy guide for this one per se, but Yoshi was in this one. That was really cool. The Star World, the hard stages at the end of all this, like just had a lot of hidden stuff packed in that you could find and unlock if you wanted to. But if you also preferred, you could just play like the shortest possible route through the world, and you could get to the end that way also. But a lot of cool stuff. I like finding hidden stuff in the games. Gameplay was really tight, and was the parachute thing that you could like fly up and then drop down, do the big kaboom on. So my number 5, Super Mario World. Let's head to Hudson again.
Just want to say really quick on your Super Mario Worldness that's was going to be close to being on my list as well. But the thing is, if they had taken the open world of Mario World and all the cool shit you could do in the map in Mario 3 and combined it into one game, it'd be the perfect Mario game. But they have not done that. They've only given me half of the perfect Mario game both times. Anyway, my 5th game is a game that was not released in the US. You have to be at least in Europe to get it. So I, of course, have only played it on emulation, and I started playing because I got into the soundtrack and started listening to the soundtrack because I download all these RPG soundtracks just to listen to them, and I like them. It's a game called Terranigma. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this thing. It is the weirdest game I have ever played. And I was just right now watching through a scene on YouTube to try to remember if it was a fever dream. No, there is a scene where a couple of goats who are married, one has fallen and is really hurt, and the wife is asking you to eat her husband so you can stay alive.
What the hell?
This happens in a game. It's an action RPG similar to Secret of Mana, or kind of Link to the Past a little bit. I'm going to say that I have not yet beat this game, and that's why it's on my list, is because I've been slowly playing through it for a couple years. And I don't know, it is the most batshit insane story. It doesn't make any sense. I would almost say you should just like look it up just so you can just see how crazy it is. You start underground and everybody in your town like freezes. So then you have to start like doing things so that people unfreeze, but then you go to the surface and then you have to do something to bring the plants back, and then the animals back, and then the birds back, and then the people back. But then once they come back, it's like they've never been. It's so weird. It doesn't make any sense, but it's a great game. And I have very much enjoyed playing it. And the soundtrack is amazing.
You play games far different than anybody else I know. It's so weird.
You mean like the whole over a year thing?
Yeah, like you'll be like, I've been playing this one for 15 years. And he doesn't mean he's been replaying it for 15 years. He means the same playthrough continuously for 15 years.
I feel like I would just forget where I was. What was I doing?
How often, just my own curiosity, how often do you play these games?
I probably haven't played Terranigma for probably at least a year and a half. I get into other things as I'm doing it, but I was really into it for about 6 months.
But you'll pick that up and keep playing it.
If I can remember what I was supposed to do and where I was.
Yeah.
The game is so weird. You're trying to develop these towns now, and I was on this boat with these ghosts, but I don't remember where I was going and what I was doing. It
sounds like a movie Justin would have us watch.
It's like
it's kind of like same thing happened to me when I was playing through Secret of Mana. When I did that when I was on tour in West Virginia, and like I forgot where I was. I still have the save. I just don't know where I looked through walkthroughs trying to figure out, okay, you do this, then this, then this. Where am I? What am I supposed to do next? And I can't remember.
This is a drunken tale of you walking into a Long John Silver's or something.
Never even happened. I love it. All right, let's head to Brett, number 5.
All right, number 5. I have a pretty unique game. Maybe one of you guys has it on their list, but probably not. I was really hooked into the Lost Vikings. This was basically a puzzle game at its core, where you're taking control of 3 Vikings who somehow get abducted by aliens. The story is a bit out there, but it's not really about the story because it's about the puzzles. And it was really cool because all 3 of your Vikings that you can control have different abilities, essentially. So like one of them shot arrows, and the other one, like, you could use them as a step stool, basically. And all the stages were really well designed in that you really had to use all 3 of them to get through a stage properly. And you'd have to like use one of them to get one of the characters to a platform or something, and that character would have to like shoot a target, and that would like open a door, and so the third guy could get through, and that guy would have to go do something to let the first guy through something. And I can't think of any other game that was really similar to that in that area. There's certainly been like things, puzzle type games like that since then, but that time that was like the only game I could think of that was like that, and I really enjoyed it. It it definitely was something that got my brain working, and I don't know, it was just a really cool idea, and it just stuck with me as a game I really loved.
Did you finish it?
Yes.
Nice. I know I played it when I was a kid, and I just got really frustrated by it. I was like, this is too hard. Kudos to you.
Did that game also speak to you in the opening song? Did it like rap to you or something?
I don't remember what the opening song
funky
is
in there. But.
Yeah. It sounds like a game I would like. I should play it sometime. It sounds like it kind of reminiscent of maybe Lemmings a little bit, or
yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like that if you aren't paying attention to, enemies that are on the screen, like your Vikings can get like got.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That, and fun note is like that's one of the first games by Blizzard Entertainment. So
that's who it was. I was trying to think of that.
Yeah.
Right. I knew it was somebody. Okay, number 5, to Blue.
So all my picks are going to be safe in terms of convention, but I'm going to go with Earthbound. Mainly as probably one of my first experiences into the RPG genre. And I just love, the funky soundtrack, the fact that it breaks the fourth wall. The Blues Brothers are in it. And that's pretty great. I love everything about Earthbound. I think it's really, really interesting. It's got a bee that you smack in the beginning. That was pretty awesome. And it's got space aliens. It's just like a really, really interesting, strange game that for HAL Laboratories, like fantastic. So nothing more to say. However,
there is one thing I want to say about that game though that I didn't mention in my thing. One great convention of it that I haven't seen any other RPGs do since then is once you're strong enough to beat an enemy without really worrying about it,
just walk into them.
You still walk into them and you get the experience and everything. The battle doesn't happen. Great concept. Every game should do that.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're
struggling, a massive time saver.
Right. And you go through a cave in Pokemon and you just immediately destroy a Zubat. Yeah, that would be the best outcome.
Are we still casting in English? What just happened right there?
Yeah.
It's a Zubat.
Yeah. We're talking about Pokemon? Yeah.
No.
I forgot. Not to derail us here, but it should be an honorable mention. The game, I know you mentioned Populous, Cody.
Yeah.
I would say if you wanted a mashup between like Castlevania and Populous, the game ActRaiser. I feel like it should be on the list. It's got Yuzo Koshiro, who did the same soundtrack for Streets of Rage. Brilliant soundtrack, really neat game, and one that, like, if you have not ever played, you should definitely do. Okay, back to the top 5.
I've never played that one.
Now to 4, I believe.
Number 4. All right, so number 4. My number 4 will be shunned by most people listening to this if you're a PC gamer, but it is Sid Meier's Civilization for the Super Nintendo. Oh, Hudson just took off his glasses. Yes, that's right. I didn't have a PC that could play games growing up, so I don't even know how. I don't think I had even played this. I think I just bought a copy of this straight up. I don't know if I must have known there was a reason I was going to like it, I guess, or something. But so I bought this and played nonstop. I mean, I love the first Civilization game. I loved it on the SNES. The controls were, I hear, much more terrible on the Super Nintendo than they would have been on a PC. But nevertheless, you could figure out how to rotate through stuff pretty quickly if you played it enough times. The graphics were not great for even its time period, probably. The game itself, we probably don't need to comment too much on, but it was kind of broken where if you just got too powerful, then you could just basically run the map at a very, very slow death march across the continent of moving 500 armies, across Asia and just taking forever for that to happen. One of my most memorable times playing Sid Meier's Civilization was with my friend Chad. he had stayed over at my house for a sleepover, and I don't know how, but I got the brilliant idea that we could turn Civilization into a 2-player game. So on the easy level, you start with 2 settler units. And so we both took one and passed the controller back and forth on where we wanted our initial cities to start. And then we would start kind of keeping track of whose land was whose, even though we were the same country on the same team. And he picked, I don't know, some spot by a river or something, and his town started to grow. And I think I had played like Civilization more than he had. And so I was like, the fool, here's what I'm going to do. So I looked around for a little bit longer, and I found this spot, which this is a grid map game. If you haven't played this before with little squares, I found a square that had so it'd be 8 surrounding squares. I think 6 or 7 of them were mountain spaces, which is like the super, super heavy production. And I'm like, I'm going to build the crap out of this and like have amazing armies and big cities with all these features. Totally forgetting, despite all my games I had played of this, that you couldn't produce any food in this city. So I spent probably the first 3 or 4 hours playing this game with just my one little mountain city that could never grow and do anything at all. So he had like developed half the continent, and I was still with my one little tiny city, which sucked. Funny follow-up to this, though. We stayed the night, and of course you can't, your parents say you got to go to bed at some point. So we went to bed, but of course we left the game on pause because that's what you do. And we woke up the next day and started to play for a little bit. And I don't know why I did this, but I like made some kind of comment in this little joking gesture to like reach towards the reset button because I thought it would be funny, and accidentally really did hit the reset button and lost our game. And it was fantastic. So that was not great, but I love the game in general. Many hours spent playing Civilization for the SNES. So
I most definitely remember that argument with Chad.
It's probably going to be on his tombstone. Could have finished Game of Civilization. All right.
I definitely, I really love, just one quick thing. Yeah. I really love that game as well. I didn't have it on my list, though I really loved it. I think the last time I ever played it, I lost a battleship to an archer.
I remember you say that. I think
I promptly quit. It's probably the last time I ever played that game.
That's why I don't play Age of Empires anymore for PC. I got into that for a little bit, and then when I saw what the Chinese could do with their effing crossbowers, I was like, I am done with this shit. I'm just done. Anyway, all right, Mr. Hudson, you're 4.
So I would like to say that I have nothing against Civilization for the Super NES. I just always forget that it actually existed. I don't think I've ever actually played it, but I do love me some Civilization. I recall once driving from where we went to college down to where me and another friend of ours live, which is Southern Michigan. It's about an 8-hour drive. We had 2 computers. He had a laptop, I think, and I had a full desktop computer plugged into a power strip, plugged into my lighter, and we played Civilization on a network in my car from Marquette to Southeast Michigan. We had another person going with us, and we made them drive, and I can't believe that we did that. I feel like a jerk for that now, but it's such a memorable trip.
Like, this is the first one where like Gandhi is coded to.
It was Civilization 2. Civilization 2 for the PC.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
that's the only one I've ever actually played. So
I think it's the first one where Gandhi is just miscoded, and he like will always declare war on you.
Nice,
this is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
My fourth is F-Zero. It is because, and this was a really tough choice for me. I was switching between this and Earthbound and Pilot Wings, Super Punch, all of them. And I eventually went with F-Zero because I think I just, in general, have had more fun playing it. And there's never been a racing game like it since. And it's because of that Mode 7, as you were talking about, Cody, because it doesn't actually feel like you're turning your car. It literally feels like you're turning the track around your car. And none of the other F-Zero games have ever felt like that since. And I really would wish that Nintendo would make another game that has that feel to it. I don't think it would do well now, but I just really like it. The game has, a great soundtrack.
Yep.
I wish it had more tracks. There's only 15. It's the only game of that's type that I can think of where there's like normally there's 3 basic courses, like there's the beginner course, the middle course, the end course. And then once you complete all those, you get like the super course. It's that way in Mario Kart. It's that way in Super Punch-Out. But there's not extra courses when you get through with, that's my biggest complaint about it. But it's just a fun game. It is really fast. I love the jumping, the ramps, and it's just a very, very solid racing game that just doesn't have any other games that feel like it. It's just kind of its own thing.
Have you heard of F-Zero X or F-Zero GX?
But they don't feel the same. It feels more like you're turning your car through the course rather than you're turning the course around your car. I can't explain it in any other way. They feel like different games to me.
What about Episode 1 Pod Racer?
Ooh.
Again, it still sort of feels like you're turning your car. Not necessarily. It has this weird sort of feel of you're turning the world around your vehicle, and it I don't know. There's some I can never remember what the name of it is. There's some maze game that was an arcade game where the ball starts dropping and you rotate the maze around it, trying to get your ball through it.
Yeah.
It may be the irritating maze. I don't think that's the one though. It's something I played on MAME. But yeah, it's just a very unique feel. The other games in the series just don't feel like it to me.
True. I mean, to be fair, I think Super Mario Kart does the same thing, but it's just not the same blistering pace.
It is the one that is the closest. And I think it has to do with that mode 7, essentially.
Yeah.
Because in both of them, you are essentially, that's what the graphics are doing, is turning the world around you.
I had never thought about it that way, but you're right. It is definitely a feeling when you're doing that. Just, yeah. Like rotating a marble in an analog sense.
Yeah.
The marble maze.
Yeah.
You're not manipulating the car that way.
Yeah.
All right. Let's head to Brett.
All right. Well, at 4, I had a game that Cody mentioned earlier, and that is Mario Paint. Now, it might seem that at first, like it wouldn't be in anybody's top 5, but I really did enjoy just the creativity that you could have with this game, and it wasn't really cool. Like having a mouse attached to your Super Nintendo was just so kind of weird and just unique. It even like the computers that we had in our school at that time, I don't think even had mice. I was just like this kind of new things. Like, what does this do? But I really remember I did a lot of stuff. You could make pictures, you could make animations from your pictures, you could make music, and you could actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you could like mash all those things together. Like you could put your own music to your animations. I'm pretty sure about that. I don't remember exactly. It's been 20 years since I played it, but yeah, it was just really cool and unique, and it's just the amount of creativity that you could have with it just made it replayable, for however long we wanted to. And I remember, like, so we would my family, like, every year would go to Drummond Island for vacation, do some fishing, and of course I was brought my video games along because that's what I do. I go on vacation for your video games. And
I've seen you camping. That's true.
I would sit there. I really remember sitting there like in the cabin playing Mario Paint. For whatever reason, that just sticks in my head. But it was just really cool. But not much you could do with it. Like my animations always end up with like stick figures getting smashed by rocks and stuff, but turning into bloody smears. But it was pretty cool. It definitely has stuck with me through the years.
That's fantastic. I'm just picturing you like driving somewhere to go to an island known for fishing and playing with the mouse to create your own Mario stuff. That's funny. All right, Blue, what's your number 4?
That's a follow-up question, Brad. Did you make like awesome? Because you could do early versions of like chip tunes, right? I've heard people. I think it was maybe a phenomenon when YouTube first started coming out, but people were making like, Through the Fire and Flames
You can still find it.
Yeah, Dragon Force on
Yeah.
Mario Paint. You just find any song turned into Mario Paint, which is pretty cool.
I think I if I remember right, I found like where some other people had done that. They had shown like you get like a map of like how, this is how to create a song with with the stuff. I don't think I ever did that myself, but I remember taking someone else's work and recreating songs in it.
Well, here's my number 4. For those, can you just feel this coming through the microphone and the speaker? Is a incredible mashup of basically a dream team of gaming development, which is Sakaguchi from the Square Final Fantasy series. You have Yuji Horii from Dragon Quest series, and you have Akira Toriyama who made basically the Dragon Ball manga. Chrono Trigger, I feel like really set the tone of how any of the Square RPGs that came in the PlayStation era, you can just see how they're formulaic and created after Chrono Trigger. So, I mean, I think it is, everyone says that this is like the defining RPG. People will get into pissing matches, but I think you'll be surprised. I love Chrono Trigger. I think it's cool that it has so many different endings. The sprites are amazing, and I think it's a really fun, polished game. And then the soundtrack is incredible too, because it's got some tracks that were created by Nobuo Uematsu, who did all the other Final Fantasy games. But strangely, like a lot of RPGs on my top 5, which is not a genre I grew up with, but I think it just came to appreciate them. I don't think that they require much of a skill at all, like in terms of comparatively, like Ninja Gaiden, objectively much more harder of a game than if you put the time in an RPG, it's usually pretty foolproof, and you can revert to saves as opposed to
good point.
You lose it on a stage on Ninja Gaiden, you're starting over at the beginning, and good luck. So I think it's just more of like, I like RPGs in the sense that you just solve a puzzle to kind of figure out what the boss mechanic might be in terms of how it gatekeeps you from progressing in the game. But I think Chrono Trigger is just a fantastically done game.
It is. Also, one thing I wanted to mention about it is length. For people at our age, mid 30s to mid 40s, you can play through Chrono Trigger in probably 10 or less hours. That makes it a much nicer play. Friend got me these books that are like almost like academic writing on these games. I have one on Chrono Trigger and one on another game, which is not going to be a surprise to anybody, but I'm not going to say it yet. All right, sorry.
I've still never played this game. I probably should at some point. I've thought about it many times. It's only about 10 hours, really, actually.
Yeah, but if you play through the first time, it'll probably be about, you could cruise through it. It would take you probably maybe 30 hours if you want to explore more. It's one of those things that if you want to do the side quests, it's one thing, but if you're just pushing the narrative, like Hudson said, you could probably do it in about 10 hours, maybe 20 if you're doing it really leisurely. But then you can do a new game plus, and there's like 20 different endings, which makes really
that's one thing, and that's the one thing. If there's one thing that the other game I'm going to talk about doesn't do that should do, is that new game plus. Like every game should have that, along with the Earthbound mechanic I mentioned. Yeah.
I'll think about it. Okay, let's go to number 3. My number 3 has been mentioned already today, and it is SimCity. Yet another game that was a PC game that came out on the SNES, and I love this game. I probably played this game within the last 2 years, definitely since COVID came, so still to this day try to get to a Megapolis, which I have never been able to do, no matter how many strategy guides I read or different strategies I try. I don't know why I can't do it, but I just can't do it. Even with the $1 million code, I can't get to the 500,000 people. I don't know why. So it drives me still to this day. Every once in a while, I like to pick it up and pretend that I'm going to just play with regular rules and also be super successful at it and continue to build my huge city. And that usually lasts 2 sessions. And then I'm like, this is impossible. Dumb tax rate. Anyway, but I like this one. I like the disasters you can turn on and off. I like to just mess around with some cities. and see what you can blow up. And the scenarios actually were fun. There were only 6, but they were actually pretty fun too, to like try to beat each of the little scenarios, whether it was a flood or nuclear meltdown that had happened or whatever the case was, trying to clean it up and win. I liked the little special buildings you'd get every once in a while, the casino or the amusement park or the large park or whatever the case was. I still don't know, this probably came on like 92, so I mean this is 30 years. I still don't know where you're supposed to put the industrial areas, because those things will pollute no matter where you put it at. It doesn't matter. But anyway, loved all my time with SimCity. Spent many days with this one as well. Like I said, introduced it to my kids actually over COVID too, and they got into it a little bit also. So classic. It's simple. It's clean. It's just a lot of fun to do. And as Matt mentioned, for what is in the game, I mean, tune for tune, this is probably one of the more memorable music games for what is actually there in the game. Doesn't have a grand sprawling epic, but it has just those, 3-4 really iconic tunes for the different levels of your city. So SimCity, my number 3.
I don't know if everybody on this podcast knows this, but the reason I got a smartphone was so that I could make every person I know have a unique Super Nintendo ringtone. And Cody's is, in fact...
Oh.
That's your ringtone. When you call me, that's what it does.
I got to call you more often, I guess.
This will be explored in the rest of this episode, I hope, for all of us.
Well, I haven't updated my list in a while, so I need to make sure that Blue and Brett are in there, and I will depending on their lists, I will make sure that they are appropriate.
I mean, like, you got like I don't know, probably another hour to cook this up here.
I kind of just want him to like have, I don't know, can we just get like 1,000 people to add him quickly just to see what he comes up with by the end of it all?
Hey, I need to know what your number 1 picks are before I can pick songs, though. That's important.
Does that mean mine's going to change then?
No, you're still that. Yeah, that one's just iconic.
Dang it!
Makes me think of Cody.
Should have went be more like Bison dying or Sagat dying.
You win.
You lose.
Considering the tournament, yes, probably that's the case. My number 3, we're gonna probably, I will assume, talk about this in somebody else's top 5. Certainly not Cody's, because he listed it as. But anyway, it's Zelda: Link to the Past. I don't know what to say. It's just it's the reason I wanted a Super Nintendo. Like I actually, like, I remember before I got the game having dreams about playing it. I can't say that for any other game in history. Like, I wanted to play this that bad. And it didn't disappoint at all. I remember the first time I was going through it, the first time I beat Aghanim, like, I was surprised a little bit that the game continued. Because I'm like, I got all the 3, got the Master Sword boss. Oh, crap, there's more game. The bosses are all quite interesting. It's still, unlike the later Zelda games, it's not all hinged on the puzzle aspect. There's still just fighting aspect as well. Like, it's more of an action puzzler rather than a puzzler actioner. But that's, again, preference. I don't know what else to say about it. Like, I finally, a couple of years ago, went through and got absolutely everything for the first time. Got all the hearts, all that stuff. It's just I don't know, lots of hidden shit to find, lots of stuff to do. It's like Zelda, but it's just better than Zelda. I don't know. It's my favorite Zelda game.
That was fantastic. I mean, Blue said earlier, it might be objectively the best Super Nintendo game. Probably depends on your genre preference, but if you're into that, like you said, puzzly.
Remember how I said that everybody has a ringtone at my former job that I left fairly recently. I had gotten a new boss like a year before that, and I'm like, so this is weird, but like, I have to give you a ringtone in my phone. What kind of Super NES games do you like? So, well, I really like the Zelda game, and I'm like, I don't have a Zelda. Like, I made all my bosses have boss music. So he's now the boss music, even though I'll probably never get another call from him. But he's the boss, Zelda boss music. Zelda Link to the Past boss.
Figured it'd be more like when you damage the boss. It's like, well,
I have to use songs, not
exploding.
I want actual music as opposed to, yeah.
We should be clear. You left the job, right? They didn't fire you after you asked the boss that question.
Oh, no. I was there for almost a year more than that. Yeah.
He gave you his answer, but in the back of his mind, he was thinking this guy's on the way out already. Trust me. Weird. All right, Brett, you're number 3.
All right, number 3. I had kind of a somewhat groundbreaking game, and that is Star Fox. Being, I know there probably was something like somewhat before that, but it was the first game that really kind of felt like a 3D world, like you're actually flying through a 3D space. Though in truth, it really wasn't. It was just kind of a play, just the way they use because everything was just polygons, and there was no like rounded surfaces or anything that you're used to seeing in every other game. And it just the use of all those sharp lines and the shading of them, they're able to create an effect of a 3D space. But it really wasn't. If you like pay attention, like things in the like objects like buildings in the side just kind of move past. You can't like fly around them or anything like that ever. They're just like moving past you. But still, it really felt kind of revolutionary. Like, oh my gosh, this is really cool to see. And I'd always been a really big fan of flying type simulators. I had the Top Gun game for the NES and put a bunch of time in that. And so it was really really entertaining. The characters were cool because they had personalities. They like each character in the game. You like there was the funny guy, and then there was like the serious guy, and then there was you really kind of all felt it went together well. It felt good. It had like you felt like you were a part of this team. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but it was just really enjoyable. It was just kind of a new thing that really kind of it just brought something new and exciting.
Yeah, I like that one. Didn't make my list, but I think it's really interesting just from a technical standpoint, like you said, Brett. Have you ever watched the game series it's a limited series on Netflix, but they talk about more or less like a British software company called Argonaut, like figured out how to do 3D graphics or did something similar, and then they worked with this team, basically flew them to England, locked them in like a basement, and then like built Star Fox together as a collaboration. So like it's really cool, and I just like the backstory of the creation of that game. I think it's a really cool franchise that as a whole, like Star Fox probably should get more attention nowadays, but it's one that Nintendo has kind of rested its laurels on, unfortunately.
Yeah, kind of like F-Zero. They haven't really made a game. Star Fox 64 sort of felt like the original one, but since then they've all been sort of like weird, different genres that aren't really like Star Fox.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the issue. They just need to make a new Star Fox game. Like,
I mean, they have, but it's just they haven't been as good. Like, I feel like just Star Fox 64, I feel like is the defining Star Fox game for me.
Mm.
And then there's like the GameCube ones were not very good, and then there was a one on the Wii U that I didn't particularly care for, but love it because it was outside of like Star Wars Arcade, right? I feel like it was the first 3D game that I experienced on the Super Nintendo, or like for Sega Genesis, Virtual Racing was the first polygon based game that it felt was rendered.
Got any favorite tunes from Star Fox there, Brett? I don't think I have any Star Fox ringtones. I don't think I have your number in my phone either, so I'd have to double check that.
I don't know I don't actually remember the music. It doesn't.
Oh man, you need to look up
sticks out to me, but
look up the music. Asteroids and Space Armada. Choice. Space Armada is my favorite.
Will do.
Interesting. So Star Fox for Super Nintendo got the Super FX chip, and then Star Fox 64 was the first with the Rumble Pack. So it used to get some love by Nintendo, and then I don't know. All right, Blue, what's your 3?
3 is actually one I'm playing through right now, and much to probably the delight of Hudson, I am playing Final Fantasy 3, which would be 6. So, because I feel like there's a lot of foreshadowing to come. really enjoy it. I think obviously it's ranked higher than Chrono Trigger for me, which I think was a debate that Matt and I were having as to which one was more. I think just the mechanics of 3 are much more polished than Chrono Trigger. It's clear to see how formulaic the Final Fantasy series became, and I think this is really the template for it. And so lots of similar themes. I really like some of the Esper magic system. And so I won't go too in depth here, but I'm really enjoying it. I haven't beat it yet, but I think just the character development, some of the mode 7 is really interesting to me. And yeah, I'm probably, I feel like Hudson, please spare me the spoilers.
Yeah, I will. I just, how far are you?
I am, let's see, I just about to go maybe to the Empire. I just found out that Terra is an Esper, or I went up to the tower and found her there.
Oh, wow. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers for you when it gets to me as best as I can. There's a big one. There's a real big one.
I know there's a world of ruin, so I mean, but,
okay.
Don't,
all right.
At this point, I feel like, it's been 30 years. You can just, I know that some pieces are coming, mainly because I bought the guidebook.
Did you do the opera? Did you get through the opera?
I just did the opera. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah, the aria for that was actually the entrance music at my wedding. It was a nice strings version of it. It was really pretty. Everybody thought it was. No one knew how nerdy it actually was.
Nerd.
Is it your wife's ringtone?
Yeah, actually, yes, it is. But but the actual aria is someone else's, but Celis's theme, which is also the aria. It's a different version of it. Is Allie's. So
yeah. This game's great. I think I think I prefer it to Chrono Trigger just for the sense of how polished it is. Maybe I'll feel differently if the narrative gets drowned out or goes down the shitter. But it's pretty amazing so far.
Nice. I have a feeling what your top 2 are going to be. By the way, I just have a guess. So,
all right, we'll keep moving here. Number 2 is all around. My number 2 is a game that I, at first glance, probably wouldn't think I had spent that much time on, but when you do the math,
Super Black Bass, got it. Yeah.
No, I liked Black Bass. I never played Super Black Bass, but I liked Black Bass. I don't know how many hours I've put into this. All I know is your clue is when COVID hit, it affected many things in the world, and I was missing one thing that I no longer had that I normally had, and so I had to simulate it myself at home here. And Brett has mentioned this one already. It's Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball. Oh, Brett. The game with, as mentioned here, all the fake teams and the thematically named players, which are always hilarious. But I love this game. It had just, I don't know, I still wish there was a baseball game that had these controls, but just a modern roster. And I would probably buy that every year when they put it out. It's just so simple, but the controls are just so tight in this game. Base running was simple. Catching the ball and running around the field was really simple. Throwing to the bases was simple. Batting was simple. Pitching was simple. Kept track of a few stats. That would be something they could modernize. Maybe have a more full stat roster that you go through and have more categories for batters and pitchers. But this was great. It had all the stadiums of the time, which was kind of revolutionary. I was playing Baltimore because I liked the way their outfield looked with the big warehouse out there in the right field, and Boston,
which
obviously.
Has since burned down, probably.
Wow. Okay. No, most of them probably are not the same. I mean, they go through stadiums so quick nowadays. It's crazy, but now we have Preparation H Arena, but that's, that was the movie Basketball. I apologize. That was just
Didn't have a home run derby mode, because I feel like that was cinch. Or is that the one that came after?
I don't know if it had a home run derby.
I feel like that was I just have a snapshot of playing.
I want to say maybe that was the sequel.
I think it did have a home run derby.
Did it have a home run derby? Okay, I know it had exhibition and season, and I think you could do just the World Series if you wanted to.
I think it was you get like 20 pitches and just how many you can
Oh,
knock
maybe,
out.
yeah.
I think it was like 9. No, yeah, I can't remember, but I remember like staying at a friend's house, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna go somewhere. But, like, let's quickly fire up the home run derby mode and see who wins."
This one was also fun just because I like to do the season mode whenever I play a baseball game or a sports game, and this one was also nice because if I believe correctly, you could choose like 3 or 4 different lengths for the season. Like you could do the full season or like a 30 game or whatever. So that was kind of nice too. I always did the full game, of course, but side note on this one, I have to share another story. It's not about this game, but it's probably not a game that's ever going to be featured in an episode here. So when I had the Ken Griffey Jr. winning run game for the 64, two stories in one story here. I played it with my roommate sophomore year, Brandon. Matt, you remember good old Brandon. We played
good guy.
A co-season, which was the first time I had done that with someone. So we were both playing a season together with our own respective team. We'd have to trade back who played what game and try to get through the whole thing. And one night I came home and he was in like the first round of the playoffs with the Tigers or somebody. And I was like, "Hey, I thought we were in May." And he was like, "Yeah, I just simmed the whole season. I made the playoffs. You didn't make it. That's tough." And I was like, "That's cool. I put in like 100 hours on my team, but that's cool." So that's gone. So that was funny, number one. But number two, I always remember this one too. Somewhere there exists a picture of this, and I don't know if it's like a actual old school picture or if actually it's a digital file someplace. But I was playing, I don't even know what team I had, but I was playing like against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And as every sports game, especially baseball games, do, when like that player gets tired in the game, they sub them out and put in a new player. And so the pitcher for the Diamondbacks, I had just like shellacked, and they put in another pitcher whom I promptly killed, and they put in another pitcher whom I killed. And, they're pitching like an inning, 2 pitches each. Well, they only have like 10 pitchers in the game. So they got to the point where they were on their last pitcher and they couldn't sub this guy out. And I just ran up the score like 165-3 or something, because like the guy was just throwing like 40-mile-an-hour slow balls over the middle of the plate. It was just amazing. But anyway, I love this game. Yeah, this is another Ken Griffey Jr. I love it. Oh, and we have to give a shout out to the announcer as well, whose name I'm forgetting. Help me out here. Oh my gosh. I can't think of his name now. This is terrible. The guy from Seattle. It's in the Macklemore song. They write the whole song about him. What's this dude's name? Oh my God. Somebody help me out here.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Sorry, listeners. I got to get this on here, though.
Although I did remember in college, was able to correct someone on saying that Howard Cosell called the Tigers game. And I'm like, it's Ernie Harwell, dude. Ernie Harwell. You don't know what you're talking about.
I am totally blanking.
Dave Niehaus?
Thank you, Dave Niehaus. Yes, Dave Niehaus, the Seattle guy, legendary announcer there. But he had all the great lines, the boom shakalaka. Well, that was actually NBA Jam, but he had the rye bread and mustard grand salami time and all of the great things that he would shout out during the game. So,
well, that and too, what like the historical pieces, like Nintendo tried to buy the Seattle Mariners at one point.
That's a good point. Yeah, Nintendo's
Seattle
owned franchise, but
because that was the whole piece of why they licensed Ken Griffey.
The Griffey.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. From a historical perspective.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point. Well, that's my number 2. Ken Griffey Jr., Major League Baseball, Mr. Hudson.
All right. Number 2 is, I'm guessing, one that will come up later for one person, but it's Super Metroid. What can one say about Super Metroid? It is, I would say, one of the top 2 granddaddies of the Metroidvania. That and Symphony of the Night. You take those 2 games. If you like the Metroidvania genre, they're the 2 you have to play. They're just required playing, I think. Super Metroid is the first game I ever specifically tried to get through without dying under a certain time limit and get 100% of everything, which I managed to do at 2 hours and 18 minutes.
Oh my God.
And then my brother beat me like a half hour because that's what he does. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what else. The controls in that are super tight. The level design is super tight. Whenever you get an item, you have to use that item immediately, so you learn how to use it. Like you get the ice beam, you have to use the ice beam to freeze enemies to get out of the room. You get the grapple beam, you have to use the grapple beam to get out of it. Like it does a really good job. Like it doesn't say this is the grapple beam and this is how you use it. It like literally just tutorials you in the game to use that stuff. My nephew gives me an unending amount of shit because I can't do some of the cheats in it, like the mock ball. I have no idea. I can't do it. He's like, it's just like a Hadouken in Street Fighter. And I'm like, no, I can't do it. So I don't know. It's just a great game. Also, again, excellent music. But I find it interesting. My brother and I will both rank this game probably in our top 5. But I would rank like the music, and I like all the music in it, but he would say like the Brinstar Depths, like the doom, 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 doom. That's the one he likes. I like the more adventuresome Upper Brinstar theme.
So this is your brother's ringtone, is what I've inferred from this one.
No. He was at the start. So my brother's ringtone is actually Sabin's theme from Final Fantasy VI. It's the brothers.
I see. Yes.
And my sister's ringtone is Shala from Chrono Trigger, the sister.
Yeah.
There's no words to describe how stupid and dorky I am.
I love it. And I imagine your brother just pummeling people all the time. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know what else to say about Super Metroid, except like I remember planning a route through it so that I could try to get through it in like under 3 hours without dying and get everything. Strangely enough, the part when I went through it that I'm most worried about dying in is either the Crocomire boss, because I'm particularly bad at doing that for some reason. And if you run out of missiles, it can be really hard. It's the one where you have to keep hitting him. You can't kill him. You just have to keep knocking him back until he falls into the lava. I've come dangerously close to dying there multiple times because I'm just not good at that boss. So.
All right. Number 2, Brett.
All right. 2 I had a game. So there was many games that, you'd play with friends or whatever, but I feel like this game was like the first game that you get people together because it was like a party game, and that's Super Mario Kart. And certainly you had plenty of racing games before this came out, but they were all just kind of like actual like racing, like simulation type stuff, more or less. And this was a racing game where you had these crazy power-ups and items, and you had like speed boosts, and you had like you could jump over things, and the main game part of it was fun and unique just on its own. But then you had this whole multiplayer battle mode, which was amazing. It's certainly when you got into the 64, the 64 version was way better than leagues above this, but for the time it was really cool just to run around in these stages and like trying to fight your friends and knock off their balloons, and it was just like a whole new thing it was just fun. It was just pure fun. I don't know if I could say much more about that. It really was the battle mode was kind of like brought this game to the front for me. Just really, really enjoyable.
You also bring up something that, because I mentioned F-Zero earlier, the biggest flaw about that game is that it did not have a multiplayer. That's the one thing that I thought Mario Kart did exceptionally better than F-Zero was the multiplayer. F-Zero misses that completely, but yes.
Yes, SNES Mario Kart also had, you picked the driver, right, which was kind of, I don't know if that was unique for the time, but
it was the first racing game where I actually like pick who you are.
And I like to, because the later games, like the kart you chose was more important, I felt like, but in the early games, it was like, I want the fat Donkey Kong or the super skinny fast dog Koopa Troopa.
I mean, you were technically picking your racer in F-Zero as well, but you were more picking the car because no one knows who those characters inside are, except freaks like me.
Who are we, and how do we really know that? I feel like just ask essential questions about F-Zero in Mario Kart.
Yeah,
love it. All right, number 2, Blue.
So I mean, honestly, I think hands down, it's already been mentioned, but Super Mario World, I think up there between Super Mario Brothers 3 on NES. Maybe edges it out as far as being the best Mario game, but my goodness, I think there's, as much as I love Sonic, I think, Sonic is really just about going fast, and whether or not the platforming is not, clearly Sonic, you just go fast, but like the platforming isn't that polished and pretty error prone. But Super Mario World, like, it is perfection as far as level design. Cody mentioned, unlocking pieces that branched paths to, you go even to the Star World. Like, those things are just really cool. And then the final boss, with Bowser, is just really neat. Easily one of the best Marios. That, if anything that comes close to it, maybe 3D version would be Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Odyssey, but easily one of the top, if not, you're splitting hairs at the point where you're trying to figure out what is the best Mario game, and Super Mario World has to be in the conversation there.
Yeah, for sure. Right. All right.
And time for the intermission.
And again, I'd always say, if there were a game that had the world of Super Mario World and the world interactivity and the extra suits of Mario 3, that would be the greatest Mario game ever. And I don't know why why won't they give that to us?
What are you saying? You just want Super Mario World with like the little item shops and like that type of thing?
Yeah, items that you can get, like extra suits. Super Mario World had the mushroom, the feather, and the fire flower. That's it. Like,
and the star. Come on.
The star, but that's it's not a suit. It's not okay. It does have a star, but it doesn't have the Hammer Brothers suit. It doesn't have the Kuni suit. It doesn't have the frog suit. Like all these, and it also has like things like little hammers that you can use in the overworld. I just thought that Mario World missed that sort of stuff.
You got Yoshi and the man that is a football dude, just charges at you.
Charge a chuck, yeah.
Yeah. Damn it, Hudson, interrupting my Donkey Kong underwater theme intermission music.
I didn't know. I'm sorry.
That's his ringtone he has for you. I can't believe you did that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Intermission, Donkey Kong Country intermission. If that's your number one, I'm totally wrong with everything you picked, by the way.
You don't love that? I mean, I feel like
I've never actually. Donkey Kong Country, just again, I wasn't into linear games, so it didn't jump at me.
Oh, it's not linear by any means. Have you ever tried to?
Okay, you have convinced me. I will play Donkey Kong Country.
Oh, it's great.
It's
fantastic music, also.
Yeah, you just make that into all of our ringtones by the end of the.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe my next podcast I'll have it all.
I like it. All right. I think we are somewhere near number one at this point. So let's pick up here. My number one is a game that has been mentioned tonight. You're not going to get a surprise here for me at number one, sadly. And again, in terms of crisp, clean controls, this is up there. In terms of simplicity, this is up there as well. This is, a game formula that has been patterned many times since this game has been out, but I don't think anybody has done it as well. And if you tried to get me to play a game similar to this game today, I probably would give it maybe one play and just quietly put it down and say that's the end of it all. But like a lot of my nostalgic choices I have here, these are going to be triggered by memories I have. So I wouldn't say this is the best SNES game, but I'm going to say for tonight, at least on my list, it's my top favorite SNES game. And that is over Matt Hudson's left shoulder. Super Street Fighter 2 is what I'm choosing as number one. Just the simplicity of two friends having a battle, going at it, and seeing who could win. Also probably got some points for me because this was a rare game. Not the super version, but the probably regular version, and then Turbo. In the arcades, I would actually pay money to play, which once I started having consoles, as we talked about earlier, I probably paid less money at arcades, but this is one I'd always sink quarters in. Still today, if I was someplace and they had one, I'd probably throw a couple quarters in and just see what I could do. The extra 4 characters in this one, DJ and Cammy and T-Hawk, and who's the fourth one? Oh, Phi Long. Add the roster up a little bit. Simple, but it's a lot of fun. And Hudson was referring to earlier, how did we start that exactly?
I don't know.
I don't either. Somehow we got this idea, though, that Hudson and I were going to create a grid with all 16 characters, with me playing each of the characters against him playing each of the other characters. Well, actually, all mirrors as well. So you got 16 times 16. Is that all it is? No, it's 16 times 16 times 16, right?
No, I think it's just 16 times 16.
You got 16 characters. Each one you can play 16 times. Yeah, I guess it is like
256 matches.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're about halfway through.
it's about halfway through, and Cody is ahead by a sizable margin. I've often said, and I'm going to stick to this: if we got together once a year and played like 3 or 4 battles and then stopped, I would probably easily come ahead. But what happens is I have a very predictable play style. So once it works really well the first couple of fights, but once he kicks into it, then I have a very big problem. So
yes. So I love this one. It's real simple. I have sold almost all of my Super Nintendo games at this point, but I think I still have a copy of this floating down in the basement just in case I ever need to break it out for situations.
So if you're halfway through and you do 4 matches a year, you'll have to do. You'll take you 32 more years to get this accomplished.
let me see if I can get it here.
We got it. I think we can. The other thing is you got to pick who you want here.
Wall.
So
for some reason, I was really excited about my Guile versus your Chun-Li that I won. I don't know why. It's circled and I wrote awesome.
That feels definitely an Innuendo-ish.
Awesome. There you go.
I have no idea.
I love it. Good stuff.
I'll show you my Chun-Li if you show me your Guile.
I don't care particularly about either of those 2 characters, though. I'm not good with either of them. I don't enjoy playing that. I don't know.
They're both fine. Anyway, my number 1, Super Street Fighter 2, which is better than the other versions of the game as well. So there we go. Mr. Hudson.
Yeah, okay. It's Final Fantasy VI. I mean, you knew that. I mean, I don't know what else. The story is just freaking epic. The music is freaking epic. Every character has their own musical themes, which when I first did the phone thing, that was what gave me the idea. Like, ooh, which one of my friends is going to be Cyan and which one's going to be Edgar and all this and the other, I just had to, that's what started the phone thing. But like I said, my friend gave me these books that are like almost like academic writing about these games. And this one pointed out something that was very obvious to me, but I never really thought about it. And that's just the way the game is designed. It's designed with 14 different playable characters that all have their own stories and they're all sort of weaving together. But the first half of the game is specifically designed around the villain being the central character. So it's everything he does and everything that happens around him. In that way, it's weird, but the game is actually structured like Infinity War. And it actually ends the same way too. Like the first half of the game is Infinity War. It's Kefka getting all this power, Kefka setting up the power, and Kefka destroying the world. That's Act 1. And Act 2, just like Endgame a little bit, is
spoilers.
No, I mean, you know what's going to happen. You just have to. It's about finding all your friends.
Win the game.
Yeah. You do win the game, but it's all about collecting all your friends. One thing I'm going to say is this Blue, and this is not a spoiler. This is you don't want to have to go back and redo this when you get to the end. At the end of the floating continent, it's going to say, do you want to leave or wait for the time to run out? Wait for the time to run out. Otherwise, a character dies and you cannot get them back.
Just like very cryptic, as if I'm watching.
It is. They wanted to kill off a character but weren't sure how to do it and didn't want to do it permanently. So
I feel like you're telling me to swing away as if I'm watching Signs.
Yeah, just I mean, it gets pretty obvious later. It actually, the first couple times you say wait, then it eventually says, I want to get off this floating continent, or I got to wait for so-and-so. So wait for so-and-so. That's my only advice about that. I don't even know what to say. It's just this story it's just so good. It's literally like the Lord of the Rings to me.
I mean, it is accurate in that sense that it counts your steps, which we're talking the hobbits. They took a lot of steps.
They did
probably more steps than an actual human would to throw a ring into a volcano.
It also just it also has a really great setting. It's very steampunkish. It's not like full fantasy, but it like has slightly industrialized cities with like mechs essentially. Like I don't know. And the characters are really customizable. Like they all have their one little special ability, but if you want to make them a fighter or want to make them a magic user, you can basically do what you want with them. They're very open for the most part. Some are a little harder to customize than others. But
yeah, that's what I was mentioning. It's like the junction system in like Final Fantasy VII is much more difficult than the Esper system. How you learn spells. Like I think the fact that the Espers are tied to your magic and everyone can learn everything is really neat.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right.
I don't have a whole lot more to say about it. If you've never played it, you should play it.
Yeah, what are you doing? Go get it now, Cody Fleming.
I know it'll take forever to play, but if anybody is interested, I'd be willing to play a little bit with them over Zoom maybe for like the next 10 years. That'd be a way to do it.
Gotta not schedule it when we get our 4 matches in a Street Fighter every year, though, just to be clear.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
All right. Well, I am intrigued by these last two because I don't know where they're going to go. So, Brett, what's your number one?
All right. Well, number one, I don't know that I can add much because the descriptions from Cody and Blue summed it up pretty well. But number one for me is Super Mario World. It just feels like, with Nintendo, always the Mario games kind of are. It feels like Nintendo. That's what Nintendo is. It just feels like Mario. But something about this game, it's as close to perfection for a platformer as I think you could get. Just about it. It's simple. It's fun. The controls are great. I guess you guys didn't really talk about the graphics so much, but the graphics are just really clean and crisp and vibrant, and everything just feels good to just walk around. It feels a bit like cartoony, but in a good way. They got all these extra pixels that they could use from the original Nintendo, and they use them wonderfully. Everything just feels like a great world to walk around in. And you had Yoshi, which was super cute, and just this like great little companion that you can kick off the edge of a platform if you wanted to. And I don't know if I can really add much more, but it is just a great game that I think it's probably my wife's favorite Super Nintendo game as well. We play it together every once in a while until we both just get frustrated with it and put it down, but we enjoy it while we do it. So yeah, that's my number one.
It's making me want to play it again now.
I think everybody else has put this in their list but me. So I want to ask all of you briefly, have you ever played the sequel or tried to play the sequel? Because the sequel is friggin' weird, and I have not. I've never managed to get into it. I've tried multiple times.
Oh, the one with baby Mario.
Yeah, you're like
Yoshi's Island.
Yoshi's Island.
Yeah.
I don't think I played that one. No,
it's weird. And I mean, we're talking about a game. It's a successor to a game that has football players guarding like goalposts for some reason that are your enemies.
I never played it either. I know the art style is wacky.
It looks like Mario Paint. It looks like someone made it in Mario Paint.
Yeah, that's a good call. No, I never did. Super Mario World, yeah, everything. I mean, sounds stupid, but even like stages that had the like fences that you like smacked and then rotated to the other side on, like I was like, whoa, I'm behind the thing. little deets here. So I don't know. I have not been keeping track enough to come up with an aggregate number one here, but I think that's got to be in contention. Let's see what Blue's got. Number one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to tip the scales here, but Link to the Past is my number one. I think it is. One, it's the first Super Nintendo game that I actually beat, on my own, and actually was my introduction to the Zelda series as a whole. I just love it. I mean, I feel like people have talked about why they love it. I think the only detractor is that you could like screw up the hearts if you were collecting the pieces in the wrong order. If there's like a 3/4 piece here, there's a quarter piece there. And if you didn't do the math right with your fractions, then you're kind of screwed out of a total piece of heart. But, it is like Hudson said, you get the 3 pendants, you go to get the Master Sword, which is fantastic. Like that's an awesome cinematic moment where you yank the Master Sword out of the earth and all these bunnies and things like go ape shit for you. And then, then you go to the Dark World. I feel like the Dark World theme is fantastic. I should preface by saying like the setting is amazing. You wake up, your uncle's gone, and then he's murdered in a hallway for you. You grab his sword, and that starts your tale. Like that's pretty dark. And I just loved it. That was where I saw how graphically the Super Nintendo was just such an advance. Like the lightning crashing, the raining, just the isometric graphics, not isometric, but just the way the world scaled. And the first time that you hit the overworld and you hit the iconic Zelda theme, blew me out of the water. So I think that is hands down my favorite Zelda game, close to Ocarina of Time, maybe Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, but clearly a solid entry that defines the Zelda series.
Super good games.
And no, you still want the water intermission music, or I don't have someone for the Dark World yet. I was also thinking maybe the Lost Woods theme would be a good ringtone for you.
No, I mean the 64 Lost Woods theme is much better than.
Oh boy!
Yeah, we're
muting
getting
myself.
Look at the time, boy.
It is that is a good. The Lost Woods for the 64 is amazing, but I'm using 16-bit tone, so.
It's weird how I consider myself a very musical person, and you all clearly know video game music far more than I do, and when you're all talking about it here.
Yeah. Truly, I think I'm with Hudson. Like, if something evokes nostalgia as far as a game or what really defines a game, it has to be the soundtrack on top of. It just creates the ambiance. Like, if the immersion factor really just depends on how well the soundtrack is composed, and just we haven't even really talked about it, but just the technical feat of sound engineering on these consoles. I think it's just, there's great. It's cool when you see like Yuzo Koshiro. I mentioned it before, but there was like a Streets of Rage concert where they're just playing Streets of Rage music and all these fans are going nuts. And it's just like, okay, that's when you have like a cultural phenomenon. So technically you push the limits, and I'm with Hudson. I love game music. So maybe that's a future one of like, what are the best
game
soundtracks? Yeah.
Wow. It's a deep dive.
I would certainly
for you guys,
be.
For me,
it would be there, but wow, that would be difficult for me. Top 5, like from any. Oh, okay.
Yeah. We haven't even said it yet. Don't get there yet. Who knows?
I'm already having palpitations though.
Yeah, that would be really hard. Wow. It's a good challenge though. 3 of the 5 would clearly be from the NES game North versus South, but the other 2 would be open for debate.
So what was the score then? I feel like we all had. Hudson didn't have Super Mario World in the top.
I didn't keep track of the aggregate. We had 3 Mario Worlds. What else was anything else in the top?
Because
couple of Zeldas.
A couple Zeldas.
Yeah, who had Cody? Zelda wasn't in your top 5.
It was my 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, same for me.
Blue and I both had FF6. I almost had Chrono Trigger as well. I love them both, but I swapped it for F-Zero at the last minute.
I think Brett was Mario World your second.
Mario World was first. Mario Kart was second.
Oh, Mario World was first.
I'm surprised no one else picked Kart because that is an excellent game. That's one I forgot to mention, but
I think that makes it the.
It's got to be it then.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Super Mario World. So
no one else picked Terra Nigma. Really?
So does that mean that we all just had the best nostalgia for Super Mario World, that it's that great of a game, or that Nintendo peaked with the package game that came with the system and just went downhill after that.
No, it is a very good game, and I played it a ton. I mean, we all played it a ton because it came with the friggin' system.
Yeah,
and it was an excellent game.
that's fair.
I mean, it's. I don't think that's an uncharacteristic judgment of it, though, Cody. Like, if you're gonna put a pack-in game, you might as well lead with your heavy hitter. I mean,
that's true.
Donkey
It
Kong
also made
Country,
sense. Yeah,
Donkey Kong Country was also a pack-in. I think there was maybe a couple other Super Mario All Stars. I'm surprised we didn't bring that up, but that's a really good one.
We extinguished this one. Somebody said beforehand that this was a system that was maybe really top heavy with like the heavy hitters. You know, maybe you take the Big Ten or whatever, and certainly we saw those on many people's lists tonight.
Yeah, and without a hands down, I mean, it's not even an argument. The Sega Genesis pales in comparison to how polished and well-rounded the library is. So, I mean, top five is worth. I think the top five on the Super Nintendo are better than the top five on the Sega Genesis, hands down. So, don't even need to disagree about that. But
yeah, I'd probably say that too.
Yeah,
even though I really, really loved a lot of my Genesis games, but
same. Yeah, that's by no means not dissing the system because I love it.
yeah,
but the Sega Genesis. So really, we're going to be ranking our top 10 games, but a little bit of banter, a little bit of back story of what our journey with the console was, what your personal experience was, and then what your favorite games are. So hopefully there will be some actual disagreements this time, and maybe Cody will storm off and get a Smirnoff Ice at some point. But yeah,
you're too late. I started with it this week.
He's
just kidding. It's
Speaking of
Bacardi
things
Sunset
from the
Punch.
90s.
Yeah,
I'm going to show my fellow host though how much I've upped my game here for my drinks behind the scenes. I have one on ice.
Wow.
For when this one is gone. How do you like that?
It's like a can of rosé.
Some what is this?
Good old box wine.
I don't know what company this is, but it's a Moscow Mule in a can, and they're delicious. I had one last night just to get in the mood for this podcast.
Yeah. Honestly, Moscow mules are delicious. So you'll have to tell us as a break how that tastes. Yeah. So anywho, to topic. Curious just to kick it off. What are folks' experience with the Sega Genesis? Oftentimes we're talking about the generation of where we still visited our neighborhood friends. Like, one of you might have a Sega Genesis down the street. Mm-hmm. One of you had one in your home. And so our exposure to that might be all over the place, but just curious, what are people's experience with the Sega Genesis for Sam?
I guess I'll start being the co-host. For me, the Sega Genesis was the first gaming system I bought with my own money. Prior to that, I had an Atari 7800 and, believe it or not, an Intellivision that I inherited from a cousin of mine who gave it to me when he got a shiny new NES. But this was the first like current gen, shiny new thing that I picked up. I worked like an entire summer just doing odd jobs for my neighbors and things until I had enough money to go in and buy this thing. And at that point, the Super Nintendo wasn't out yet, so it was the Genesis or the NES, and the Genesis just looked so much shinier. So I went in, got it, and I was a Sega kid pretty much from that point until, well, I had a Genesis, I had a Sega CD, I had a 32X. I drank the Kool-Aid pretty much up until the 32-bit era. At which point my parents realized, well, you've got these add-on things and you've got like one or two games for each of them. And we're not going to buy you the Saturn because you're probably only going to get one or two games for that or something like that. So I couldn't really blame them for that. But man, I had a blast with my Genesis, blast processing, if you will. Tish. But yeah, it was a huge part of my formative years. And I've got some really great memories from games that came out for it.
Well, I had the Genesis. I explained this once the last time, I think, when we were probably doing the Super Nintendo one, where I had to like swap systems as I like grew from one to the next. But I did have the Genesis and the Super Nintendo at the same time, and I played both of them, I would say, fairly evenly. I had several games for each that I enjoyed quite a bit, but I definitely spent plenty of time on my Genesis through my my early mid-teen years, and I don't know, not that I'm trying to brag or anything. I had probably like a dozen games or so, something like that. I had a pretty decent, good selection. We always, you know, as we do back there, you go and rented the games, and so there was plenty of other games I played as well. But yeah, I enjoyed my Genesis. I had a few of these games I have on my list here are some that are still fairly on my all time list. So yeah.
Cody, why don't you jump in there?
Yeah, I don't get this whole Sega thing. I don't really know what's going on here. Listen, I was confused when I saw the Genesis for the first time because I couldn't find the word Nintendo on it, no matter how much I looked. So that was confusing to me. And yeah, no. So, well, here's the thing. My Genesis exposure is really limited. So our friend Justin had one that I played sometimes at his house. And then so Justin had one at his house and Brett had one in his tent when he went camping. So that was really the times I played Genesis, because Brett always roughed it when he went camping. So
as you do when you go camping.
As you do when you go camping with your TV in your tent and your Genesis in your tent. But yeah, obviously this has been established before, but I've pretty much been a Nintendo purist the whole time. So this was always like the rival console to me, and then don't even get me started on PlayStation when that comes along. But it's in retrospect, I've softened on a lot of these stupid things that I had when I was younger, so I will say I respect the Genesis, which is something I wouldn't have said back then. And it's just it was an alternate system that I didn't spend much time with, so I can't speak a lot to it. I'm kind of, like I said, the odd person out here this week in terms of experience. But yeah, I've just softened to the point where I've enjoyed its place in culture and nostalgia, and I've kind of weakened my views on all these things I used to hate, like the Beatles and Kiss and Rush and Queen, even a little bit. So I'm coming around to stuff as I'm getting older.
Yeah, thanks for everyone's perspective so far. I actually grew up with the Sega Genesis as well. My dad bought it at the Base Exchange when he got it one day, and it came with I believe with the Sonic the Hedgehog pack in. So probably around 1991 when that would be. Didn't have we had a Sega Master System before that growing up, so we had actually both Sega consoles in the States before. Obviously we didn't have a Saturn here in my family, similar to Justin's experience. We had 32X and Sega CD, and much like I think is nice in the history of Sega is kind of the beginning end of the downfall of Sega, and just some politics with the company, and Sega Japan versus Sega of America, and some of those console wars that were going on between Sega and Nintendo. But much like many consumers, we had households who had a Sega Genesis and 2 add-ons for it, and then the 32-bit successor that was a disc-based called the Saturn confused a lot of people and upset them, because not only was the Saturn like the most expensive console at launch, people were already feeling like, we already have this console, we put like this much money, and you're deciding to launch this one. But that's more of a tangent. I really grew up with the Genesis. I loved it. There's lots of great games on it. I also equally respect the Super Nintendo. There's technical things that are better about it. I think the Super Nintendo has a better sound chip, and most oftentimes the sprite work, even if there's a cross port, and the Konami games are a great example of this, is usually graphically the Super Nintendo is better, and it really takes a special composer on the Genesis to outdo most soundtracks on the Super Nintendo. So that said, I feel like we would probably jump into what are some of our honorable mentions, or
well, that was always a weird thing too, right? Because isn't it established, I guess, that like some games were better on one system and some were better on the opposite system? So it was always weird to me that there wasn't like a consistent,
Yeah. I mean, I think like I'd love the other folks to jump in, but like Capcom, for example, produced most of the Disney games on the Super Nintendo, whereas oftentimes it was either Virgin or a different studio that would be producing like Aladdin, for example, or Lion King. Those would often be different producers. And so it's an apples and oranges comparison between those two games in title only. But the Konami games are a really good example because they're almost, the exact same game if they were ported to one versus the other.
So we're starting with honorable mentions, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess do we want to do like all of the honorable mentions that we have at once, or do we just to get them out of the way, or?
Yeah, why don't you do all yours and then we'll go through.
Okay.
Show us yours.
Okay, so building off of what you said, I thought this was a family show.
Not for quite a few episodes now.
But building off of what Blue was saying about how different versions of games from system to system had some things that were very sometimes starkly different between them, leads me to my first honorable mention, Earthworm Jim, where the Genesis version actually had an entirely separate level, like an extra level that the Super Nintendo version didn't have. Great platformer, very weird, but it had a very distinctive art style, a lot of replayability, but I went back and played it again recently, and it doesn't quite hold up like I remembered. Other honorable mentions I have are Shining Force 2, an incredible game, tactical RPG in the style of Fire Emblem, but it didn't have the depth of a Fire Emblem game. It had a neat setting, sort of a fantasy future. So you had elves and dragons, but also like tanks and robots and things that were all kind of together, fighting for the fate of the world. I always liked the setting. The art was great, but very overshadowed by games that came after it. The Konami or the Castlevania and Contra games that came out on the Genesis were also pretty good, but very hard, especially Contra. In a weird reversal of the natural order of things, the US actually got the harder version of Contra Hardcore. The Japanese version had a life meter, so you could actually take a few hits before you died. That was gone in the US release, and it made the game just absolutely punishing. So
nice.
Yeah. So it did have. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel like that's not always what happens, right? I feel like which version of like Bare Knuckle 3, for example, I forget if Streets of Rage 3 was harder or
I've never beaten
Bare
Streets of
Knuckle
Rage
3
3 because
I know it's hard, but
Yeah,
which
yeah.
one was harder?
Yeah,
That's what you said.
So, last honorable mention, and this one was hard. I really toyed with putting this on the top 10, but because of a few unfair bosses, I left it off. Splatterhouse 3. A great brawler. It had multiple endings. You could really screw things up and still keep going. It had a time mechanic where if you didn't get through levels fast enough, very bad things would happen. Like your wife would. Well, the line "Jennifer is beginning to smell of rot" is always stands out to me. It was a very dark game and very different from anything else at its time. But it just got unfairly hard at certain parts. So that's why it's not in my top 10. That's my last honorable mention.
Makes a lot of sense now, Justin. It's just the impressionable child in playing murder games. It's like Congress was right? They're making our children violent.
Hey, they've never proved I've killed anyone.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I'll throw mine in here next. So as I tend to do in no particular order here, and I won't go into real much detail on these, but I have several honorable mentions here, including Mortal Kombat 2, Rampart, which we mentioned a little bit in the Super Nintendo episode, but I played mine mostly on the Genesis here and really enjoyed. Sonic 3, and mainly because not because I don't think Sonic 3 doesn't deserve to be in the top 10, but because I already had another one in there, I just decided I just stick this one down here out of the top 10. Altered Beast, which was it wasn't like a great, like, well produced game, but it was fun. And just the theme of it was really kind of cool to play, where you essentially are like a
furry,
a morphing Yeah. But you just, if you get enough energy power ups, I don't even remember how you play. I think when you got enough power, then you could change your whatever it was. I don't remember.
Yeah, you get 2 orbs and then boom, you turn into a wolf.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But only after you rip your shirt off.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yes.
And don't forget that digitized speech. Why is from your wave?
That's great. Yeah. Also, I had I had this on my top 10 for a bit, and then I had some other things I had thought of, and I bumped it out. But Golden Axe 2 was a great game I spent a lot of time in, and I also had Streets of Rage 2, which I know a lot of people would
What's in their honorable mentions?
Yeah,
this is over. We're done.
Who let this guy in here?
And the only reason I don't have my top 10 is not because it's a great game, but because I just didn't play it enough. The other games I have on my list, I played hours and hours and hours more than that. So
that's fair.
Yeah, that is fair. Yeah. I feel like I just build off a +1, so a couple have already been mentioned. So Castlevania Bloodlines, Contra Hardcore, and then I think I mentioned it before as maybe one of my honorable mentions in Super Nintendo, but Turtles Hyperstone Heist, completely new level, some different parts from its Super Nintendo port. So I really like that one. Doesn't crack my top 10 though. And then I'm usually not a sports fan. I love NBA Jam. I would include it as an honorable mention. Played the living crap out of that one as a Pacers when I lived in Indiana. But a game that I've played, but not too often, but really just denotes a spot on an honorable mention is NHL 94. I think it is the defining game. Was better than the Super Nintendo port, and is to this day like one of the best hockey games that has ever been made. And then probably doesn't crack the top 10 for me, but RoboCop versus Terminator, really, really good game. Super violent. Definitely, again, Congress would be like, oh my goodness, what's happening to the kids playing the games? That one was fantastic. I remember playing it with a friend in Ohio. We got to a certain stage and he paused it and we went to bed and did the old leave the console on overnight because we've made it so far in the game. And then like he immediately died the like moment he turned it off of start and got the game over. So and my final one's kind of an outside the box. I didn't have it personally, but I think it's really cool as far as a part of gaming history. But the Sega Channel. So it was like the first streaming of games in essence. Basically, it was through Time Warner cable. You basically hooked up your coax cable to this cartridge and plugged it in, and you would literally get a list of games that would change over months. Obviously just a collector's item nowadays, but it was really cool to be like, oh yeah, I don't have that cartridge. Like it's instead of, going to Blockbuster, you get a nice rotation of games each month. Lightning quick, as fast as like however much a megabyte of data could travel via coax. It's pretty speedy, and I feel like it's the precursor to things like what's the big stream Stadia with Google. It wouldn't be here without the Sega Channel.
I'm not sure it's here now. I haven't heard anyone mention that in months.
Yeah. I was not aware that Sega had that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it is pretty ahead of its time. Seems like
that is probably like Sega's namesake. Is taking a lot of risks, probably a little too many. On top of all the marketing and whatnot, but they did a lot of cool, innovative things at the time.
Yeah, because weren't the Fantasy Star games? Those were online also, right?
Yeah, the first two were not, but
okay.
Basically, the Dreamcast was, or maybe not. I think the Saturn had some net functionality, but
not on the Genesis.
But the Dreamcast was the first like true online console. So definitely takes risks.
And it was the first 4 Fantasy Stars that were not online, actually. So, FYI.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Are we up to my honorable mentions here?
Let's hear them.
I told the rest of the house before we started that they could either include these in the aggregates or not, because this is showing not having played a lot of these. So I have 3 honorable mentions. The first is Road Rash, which I know I did play and did enjoy quite a bit. Not much to say about that, just motorcycle violence. It was just a good time. Second one is Sonic the Hedgehog Part 3, which I'm sure I played at some point, but have no actual distinct memories of playing said game. And the third one here, I believe I did play this on the Genesis as well as now in person many times with a certain other host who's not here. And this is Michael Jackson's Moonwalker.
Yeah.
Which is,
you have to mention it for Joe.
Gotta mention it for Joe. Michael Jackson shooting goo from his hands to protect and save little kids. What's possibly wrong about this 20 years later?
Yeah. Perfect sense.
Yep. Those are my honorables.
Cool. Okay. Well, then let's see, like, what's crack? Do we just want to go sequentially and start with 10?
Let's do it.
Yeah. I prefer to start with 7.
7 it is. What's your 7th game?
Go from 7 to 2 and then back to 10.
So who wants to kick things off?
Go ahead, Justin.
Okay. Well, I'm probably going to just completely throw the metrics off with my number 10. And I am doing number 10, regardless of conflicting views. A game called El Viento, which is Spanish for the wind. And I didn't know that until years later. But it was a platformer. And it was one of the most just bonkers things I had played at the time. I wouldn't objectively necessarily call it a good game, but I played so much of it that it has a real soft spot in my heart. Basically, you play this girl who throws boomerangs and uses magic in 1920s Chicago, trying to stop Al Capone from summoning an elder god on top of a skyscraper.
Sure.
That stuck with me because so you're going through, you're fighting like tanks, you're fighting demons, you're fighting giant amoebas, you're fighting cavemen at one point. It was, you never quite knew what you were going to run into in this thing. And I loved it. The art style, it was low res because it was an early Genesis game, but it was distinctive. The enemies had personality. Some of the bosses were really creative. It's not necessarily a good game, but it's one that I still love to this day.
Yeah, that is not one I can't say I've ever heard of that one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know we were just making games up. That's cool. I can't wait for my turn.
All right, I'll jump in here, I guess. Number 10. This was a game that I played. I played quite a bit of with my other friends here locally, and a lot of fun. It was General Chaos. Nobody else had it, but it's pretty cool. It's like a real-time kind of military tactics, essentially. And it's kind of like an isometric view of the field, and you had 2 teams, red and blue squads, and each team had 5 units on it, and you could pick from a default set of various units. And so just for example, you had like machine gunners, you had like rocket launcher units, people throwing grenades, you had a flamethrower guy, you had a guy who was like tossing a brick of TNT around, but you picked like this from this group. Like say you had like one was like all 5 machine gunners, and then you had like another set that was like one of each, and then you actually could do like there was like a weird one where you could pick like only 2 units. I don't remember exactly how that worked, but I remember that being a thing. And essentially you're just trying to take out the other team, the opposite side, and you had a lot of different maps with different various terrain and obstacles and things that go around. And what's cool, you could play this in solo, you could play it in 2-player versus 2-player co-op, and you could actually play it in 4-player if you had the the 4-player
multi-tap.
adapter. Yep.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty cool game. There wasn't a lot to it. I mean, what I described is basically the whole game. There was a campaign mode where you're trying to like go across a map and like seize everything on this map. But it wasn't like you got to. I don't think you could even could pick where you just start from one end of the map and went together. It wasn't like you could pick where you went next. But it was fun. It wasn't, like I say, it wasn't wasn't a lot to it, but it was enjoyable. So
nice. Go ahead, Cody.
All right, my number 10 is El Phantasmo and the Chicken Run. It was produced by White Zombie for the Sega Genesis originally, and
what is that Spanish for?
It's Spanish for I will later make scary movies featuring my wife. So that's what that is. No, I'm just kidding. My number 10 is Yoshi Island 64. Are we doing? Okay, I'll throw a Sega game out here. How about
like,
this?
Would you?
My number 10 is
Zach Galifianakis.
more of what people love. It's Sonic the Hedgehog Part 2 is my number 10.
No, it's not part 2. Jesus Christ.
Sorry. Sonic : 2.
Yes, nice.
Did I do that right?
The Reckoning.
Yes. I was never good at Sonic games because I didn't play them enough to get to know how to go to the right spots to be good at them. But I was always intrigued because the games were just so different than like Mario is the face of the franchise, base platformer, for Sega compared to Mario. So we have, what did we buy? We just bought Sonic Mania for Boston, which I actually
so good.
still have not played since we have bought it. There's so many
God.
games I haven't played since we bought them, but I got to get down and try it because it looks fun. So, but I'm going with the classic Part 2 on this one.
Yeah. I'm going to go, I would almost lump 2 games in here to cheat. But I would say Genesis was marketed as like being very arcade equivalent. And so I'm going to go with Yu Suzuki's Outrun, which is one of the Genesis version is probably like as close to the arcade game you can get without, playing it at home. So really love Outrun. You're basically in a Ferrari and the stage moves along with you. It branches as you get towards a checkpoint, and it can go left or right, and it changes the stage. So lots of replay value depending on what sort of difficulty you want. Pretty synonymous with another racing game though, Super Hang-On, which is you're on a motorbike and similar things involved that you are going through stages and trying to beat a ticking clock that reduces down to 0 and then game over. So really easy to play a couple rounds. Even as I get older and don't have as much time, I always like firing up Outrun and seeing what's going on there. This day I haven't beat it, but get really close and then you're like, shit, I'm almost there. And then you're like, it starts ticking down to single digits and you're like, I'm not going to make it.
Get good.
Yeah, I know, right?
Okay. So back to me for number 9.
Number 9.
Okay.
Number 9. Insert graphic.
All right. So mine is Master of Monsters, which is a game I probably never would have heard about if my local video store hadn't had it. But it was a hex-based strategy game where basically you could choose one of. Not quite. It was about territory control though.
Okay.
So you chose like one of 4 different characters, and they each had their own set of units, their own set of spells that you could play with. Units could level up and change into other units, but it was all about taking control of the battle, various points on the battlefield, and basically running your opponents off the map, so to speak. And it had different types of terrain like tundra, forests, deserts, and certain monsters would be better in certain areas. Certain ones would be really weak in certain areas. And it was probably the first video game strategy game that I ever played. And I rented it probably enough times that I could have bought it twice over again. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I'm not sure in terms of complexity how well it holds up to modern games, but for its time, it had a lot of replay value. Not much story, but a lot of different maps and a lot of fun.
Interesting. Number 9 for me, I've got Road Rash 2, which is pretty cool. It essentially was a motorcycle racing game, but you could combat the other racers as you're going along on the road. So it was pretty cool. It was felt pretty fast as you're going along, and it just like the fact that you're fighting other people on their motorcycles was pretty wild. Some of the weapons just include like clubs, chains, like the classic cattle prod, which is what I always went for. That's when I could get it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. You could, as you win race, you get money and you could upgrade your bike, go faster, and you could eventually get to different stages and and it actually wasn't like you could win it eventually. I'm not sure that I ever did or not. If I got far enough into the stages, but I played it quite a bit, and there's like, it was fun because there's obstacles like cars, boulders, deer, cows, And one of the most enjoyable, satisfying parts of the game was when you would find another racer that would have been knocked off their motorcycle and running them over as you passed by them. sounds horrible, but for a 13-year-old, that was really satisfying. So
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah. But yeah, Road Rash 2, number 9.
Were there cops in 2 or was that 3?
3
Or
I
they
had them.
Because I would always remember like you would
I think
I can't remember
were.
if you could knock the
Yeah.
cop off the bike, but I usually always be a tense moment because if you got
Yeah.
knocked off, then you were busted.
Now that you mentioned that, I'm pretty sure there was. Yeah, there was police that would chase you down.
It's so good because you just hear the sirens and you're like, oh no, like that would be a butt clench moment of
Yeah,
oh,
because they were a lot harder than the other racers.
yeah. Like to this day, I don't know if you can actually knock the police off of the bike because I never did it.
I think the easiest thing to do was to boot them into oncoming traffic. That's what I always did.
okay.
for kids.
My number 9. I'm pretty sure I played this game back in the day. I'm pretty sure.
Naming things that you like.
Familiar to me. Well, this one has a distinction because this was a Sega game that I played. I'm pretty sure at least a little bit at Justin's, and but it was a tie-in with something from outside of video games, and this would be Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage, which I had not the whole comic run of Maximum Carnage comic books, but I had quite a few of them, and therefore, like I was big on Marvel at the time. I knew a lot of the lesser characters that were in this, like Firestar and Cloak and Dagger, and some of the other ones that were actually in the game as well, which was kind of cool because it wasn't just, you didn't just play as Spider-Man solo or whatever the case was. So that was kind of cool. And I think this one, if I recall, looked pretty comic booky like on the screen as well. So
Yep.
This one, I just remember playing at least a little bit. I'm pretty positive. So that's what I'm going with here. Number 9.
That's a good one. I mean, yeah, you get a lot of niche, superheroes that show up.
Mm-hmm.
And fighting Doppelganger, and man, Carnage is I think he's a bastard. He's one of the best villains in a comic book, in my opinion. That's a good choice, Cody. My number 9, it's hard to say, but I would probably go with, I didn't rank most of these, so I'm, by process of elimination, apologies for coming somewhat unprepared. But I would say my number 9 would be, I'm going with it. We're going to go Sonic Spinball.
Wow.
You would have to be there somewhere.
It's going to be there. Yeah. Everyone, the inside joke here is like we had a man night, and evidently my childhood reflexes of playing this game for hours on end took over, and as much everyone else was sitting for like an hour while I finished up. And Justin, I think you came close you were the closest competitor of trying to get the high score.
Oh, I probably had the most experience with it out of any of the others. But yeah, there was no way I was gonna match the like half an hour, 45-minute long performance.
Yeah, it was extraneous. We probably just said, "Hey, Blue, you win. Let's move on. Can we Joe's already drunk. Joe's asleep. Fontana went to go get a pudgy, and in hindsight, I mean, I love that game. I've never beaten it, so if it's it's kind of a dumb, but it's a fun crossover of a pinball game that involves Sonic. Don't even think Yuji Naka made it. Maybe he has like a credit on there, but a nice little, footnote in Sonic the Hedgehog history.
It just makes me think of the man night where we played Ghosts and Goblins as one of our events, and like I randomly killed like the 4th enemy of the first stage, and he dropped this thing that was worth like 10,000 points or something, and therefore I won.
Yeah,
so many arbitrary things.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, back to me. My number 8 is Dragon's Fury, known in non-prudish parts of the world as Devil's Crush. This was a pinball game with, I believe, 7 different tables.
Motley Crue?
Not Crew Ball. Not Crew Ball. That one was fun too. But no, this was more like an occult themed one. So it had like dragons, and like there was a devil that vomited up ghosts in one part, and yeah, it really well designed stages, a lot of hidden stuff, a lot of secret stuff, and it's pinball. I mean, you can play it pretty much forever, and yeah, it is one that I will still boot up and play sometimes just because it's such a blast.
All right, coming in number 8 for me, I had Star Control, which was pretty cool. It was a top-down view 2D spaceship combat game, and probably what made this game really great was the large variety of different ship types that you had that really lended to a lot of different strategies. So if you had, you might have a ship that's slow but really tough and has like hard-hitting weapons, or you have like a fast one that's a little bit weaker in the weapons, but you can zip around this big lumbering guy. And so it led to a lot of different types of strategies that you could employ. And yeah, one of the best parts of it was there was always a planet in the middle of the map somewhere, and the planet had like a gravity kind of system to it, and you could use it to like slingshot around the planet. So you could do a lot of like fun maneuvers and stuff around the planet. But the best part was you could get one of these like large ships like close to the planet and then like bump him into it, and he just like couldn't pull away from the gravity. He would just keep smacking into the planet and eventually die. That was great. But it also had a really cool campaign mode. You could play, a solo player campaign where you eventually it had the way they managed it was like this rotating view, but it was like a 3D Starfield map, and you would start at one end of the Starfield, and you would have to like go from star to star, conquering them, and then developing them and getting like an economy so you could buy more ships and build more like ship eras and stuff. And that part was really pretty cool. And kind of one of the earlier games that I played where it was like a civilization kind of like building your little thing. So but yeah, that was a great game. I played that a ton, and like I say, just a lot of variety, a lot of fun in it. So
awesome. That sounds like one I'd enjoy. This is my number 8 game. I didn't write notes for these this week, but if I had written notes for number 8, I'd probably say like parentheses, this game is dumb, but it's iconic. So I'm going to go with my number 8 choice here, which has already been mentioned, I believe.
Cool spot. Got it.
It is El Viento. No, I'm kidding. It is Altered Beast, which I just remember smashing buttons and having dumb fun with the little stupid kick the guy did, and powering up and becoming monsters and different levels having different. Basically, were different monsters and different levels, right? Is that you had like the dragon level and the crazy wolf level, and was there like a bear too for a while? You could be
bear, tiger. I think it's like 6 stages. Yeah. Was there a rhino?
I think so.
Maybe.
But that was a fun one. I remember playing that quite a bit. So that's my number 8.
Nice. My number 8 is, I'll keep the comic book theme here from Cody's past round and use DC Universe. I feel like anyone else here a fan of like the Batman animated series that was on Fox?
Yes.
Probably when we were kids.
There is a game,
Adventures of Batman and Robin. It's not a like traditional beat 'em up. It's actually kind of like a run and gun in some aspects. Like you basically are throwing boomerangs or batarangs and whatnot. But it's also fairly comic based. Like it looks just similarly cell shaded to it really keeps the spirit of the cartoon. I love the animation of the cartoon. I feel like the cartoon itself is one of the best Batman series, in addition to like obviously the greats of Adam West and whatnot. But love Batman the animated series.
Cool.
Didn't own this game, rented it multiple times just because I loved it. And yeah, definitely a great game. If you haven't tried it, you should give it a go.
I'm kicking myself for having forgotten about that one.
Oh, it's cool. I mean, it's cool. I mean, none of ours. I mean, I haven't heard some, a couple that have already been mentioned. So it's pretty cool to dabble in some different things.
Okay, I think it's back to me. Number 7, Sonic 2. It was everything from the first one, but better. It added the spin dash, so you didn't have to be in motion to start rolling and hit enemies. You could just like press down, start tapping the button, and rocket off across the screen. The levels were bigger, the colors were brighter. Some of the music still gets stuck in my head, like the Chemical Plant Zone theme. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, that'll just click.
How does that go?
Yeah, I started at a different point than Blue did, but yeah, it's a banger. So yeah, it's just everything about about the first game, but better. I don't know if Tales really added much to it, but it introduced a new character to the series, which was kind of neat. But yeah, just an absolutely fantastic platformer.
That was like the time where I feel like Sonic the Hedgehog felt fast. Like the first one felt fast, but just the way that they did the animation on Sonic 2, especially in Chemical Plant Zone, where you're like going so fast. But like Sonic will go, if you're like actually playing the game as intended, he will go so fast on that stage where he will go off the screen and the screen will adjust. And it's really quite clever programming to Yuji Naka and that team. In fact, I think that was like not a time that game was developed in the States by Sega of America. Like Yuji Naka's team came to the States to make that game.
And one other footnote about that, Sonic 2 was the first game to be released on the same day everywhere worldwide. I remember it being called Sonic Tuesday. It was like advertised in magazines and everything. But prior to that, some stores would get a game at some point, others would get it at another point. Sonic 2 was the first game to just nail down a single release date across the board, and that's historic.
I believe you mean Sonic Tuesday. Am I doing this right, Joe? I don't understand.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Number 7, I have one of the quirkiest games I've ever played, and actually Justin mentioned this already, but Toe Jam and Earl was the story. Not that the story really be like like had value to the game, but Toe Jam and Earl, I think, like these alien rappers apparently who have crash landed on Earth, and the goal of the game is to collect all the pieces of their spaceship so you can just like Lego them back together and take off, I suppose. Because but it's supposed to be Earth, but I've never seen anywhere on Earth that looks like those levels look like.
Wyoming.
It it's just everything about it was just kind of crazy and weird, and the whole soundtrack was like really funky, this kind of crazy music. It was really catchy, and everything in it was just like weird. It probably was, even though you get some of the stuff in Mario is like kind of like, well, what the hell is this? but Toe Jam and Earl was like, the game was like, I at that point in my life, I didn't know what drugs would do to you, but if I had known, I would have been like, someone was on drugs when they made this game. Yeah, it was just fun and crazy. I don't know that I ever beat it.
I did once, but it was luck. Because
it does, RNG.
Yeah, it was a roguelike essentially because all the levels were randomly generated.
Mm-hmm. But
wow.
I had a lot of fun with it. I never owned it, but I rented it more than once, multiple times. So yeah, there you go.
That's one I recognize as like a cult following, but I think I may have seen it played a little bit, but I don't think I ever played it myself. My number 7 game is one of only a few on my list here tonight that was on both Super Nintendo and Sega both, but I did play this one on both systems, and this is going to be Mortal Kombat 2, which was just a solid fighting game at the time. I've always been more of a Street Fighter person, so there's that, but this one I think just it looked good. And then didn't the Sega, is this for 1 and 2? How did that work with the blood for Mortal Kombat? Didn't like Sega have it for the first one and Nintendo didn't or something?
Yeah, Nintendo, you had to do some sort of cheat code, but
like
you could just toggle it. Yeah, it was like by default on the Genesis.
Okay.
Edgy for teens.
And this one had the like additional, this beyond the fatality, and all the babality and the friendship and the other stupid things that now I look back and I'm like, why did I spend so long trying to do this stupid animation? Like I don't.
And Toasty.
Yeah. But this is a fun one. It was a solid fighting game. Like I said, I've always been more of a Street Fighter, but I do enjoy a game of Mortal Kombat once in a while. So Mortal Kombat 2 is my number 7.
Cool. I feel like I'm with Brett here. Toe Jam and Earl is my 7 as well.
Nice.
It's funky, it's weird, it's iconic of the 90s. It's just, you're like, oh, put this game in there and be like, this is what the 90s are all about. I'd be like, yeah, that's right. It's just so weird. And so there's weird power-ups. I forget there was like rocket
Skates,
roller
I think.
skates, yeah,
Yeah.
just more often than not, those would cause me to die or fall to the level below.
You could throw
But,
tomatoes at people.
Yeah, and it was also, I don't know if we mentioned it, but it's like pretty fun if you do it co-op too. Like it's
Right. Yeah, I didn't mention that, but yeah.
you can do co-op. It's often at times hard because you're working on the same screen together, but it would also tear if you got far enough away from you, which I thought was some clever way of approaching the co-op aspect of the game. So Toe Jam and Earl, our first commonality here.
Nice.
6.
All right, number 6. I went back and forth on this one because I knew I wanted one of these games to be on here, and eventually I decided Phantasy Star 2, because Phantasy Star 4 was a strong contender, but 2 just did so much right. It was the first sci-fi themed RPG I ever played. So the basic setup is you're on this planet where most of the habitable places are under domes, and everything is controlled by this supercomputer out in the middle of nowhere, and it's starting to malfunction. It's starting to make freakish monsters. The environment is starting to go wacky. So you are sent off on a quest to figure out what's gone wrong and try to fix it. And it was such a different take on the princess has been captured, or the demon lord has awakened. It was different. It was fresh, and graphically it was just great. Really a lot of definition on the sprites for both the characters and the enemies. It had little cutscenes, kind of Ninja Gaiden style in a way. It was a great game. And spoilers for a 30-year-old RPG, you fight through all this, you defeat the big bad evil thing, and you find out the true enemy all this time is humanity. Like everyone on this planet, you're not humans, you're something else. And the human race has come from somewhere from space to try and claim this planet and wipe you out, and everything they've tried has failed. So the final scene is you and the rest of your party facing off against essentially the entire human race, and it fades to black. And
Are we the baddies, John?
Yeah. So it's implied that you went through all this struggle, all this hardship, you think you won, and then in the end you're up against odds you just can't beat. And that was a twist that I had never seen in a game up till that point. It was amazing at the time.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I love it. It's a good game. It's really grindy and difficult. Like if you don't,
yeah, definitely.
I mean, I feel like that's just the 90s and games in general. Like that was the replay value. So you'd spend more time on it. But man, I do like Phantasy Star 2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Coming in at my number 6 here, I've got Madden 95, which a lot of these Sega had the big EA Sports contract for all these, so they had everything. They had, as you mentioned, Blue, the NHL games. We had either 94 or 95 of that as well, and I played that a ton as well. But the one I played the most, I think, was Madden 95, and it was really pretty cool. This was the first year that they had the actual NFL licensing, so the actual player names were in the game and not just these random stuff. And it essentially was it's the exact same formula that Madden games have had for the last 25 years. It's the exact same thing. You pick your plays in the playbook, you pick it, you run it. You can kind of switch stuff out as you're in the middle of the play. But it was pretty good. From previous years, they had it felt like it had much better character controls, and you had different actions that you could do. It certainly wasn't like Tecmo Bowl where you couldn't do anything all, you just let it happen. There was a lot of things you could do, juke people out and dive and all this other stuff. And I don't know if this was the first year that they had, I don't know if 94 or previous years had it, but 95 had a character creator, and we used that a lot. My brother and I and our friend Adam from across the street, we made all kinds of, made ourselves in the game, made other things in the game, but we had a lot of fun with that as well. So yeah, Madden 95, number 6.
I was trying to think if I had played many sports games on Sega. I feel like I might have played some at some point, but I just can't really recall any of them Yeah, when I was looking through the like 900 games or whatever came out for the Genesis, I was like, holy shit, there's a lot of sports games in here. Like, it was nuts. They were running like 3-4 different football franchises at the same time for years, and I was like, whoa, like that's okay. All right, my number 6 game has already been mentioned, so I forget if it was for points. Might have been, so this might be another contender here. It's Road Rash 2, which we've already covered pretty well here. But again, Road Rash was in my honorables, and this is like souped up, improved version. I know I played this once in a while at Justin's house as well. Just kind of what you all said, just really fun, like vehicular mayhem, but on motorcycles, and that's always fun. I don't feel like there's actually been a lot of those games recently, or popular at least, where you can like drive and blow other racers up. It's kind of a underrepresented genre, I feel like, in today's world. I don't know if I'm off on that or if just haven't been exposed to them or what, but that's my number 6.
Nice. That is, we've got a couple here on the tally. I'll keep the suspense to the end, but looks like even between your honorable mentions, since we don't know what you're going to come up with, Cody, just tally in here and see what our aggregate is. My 6 is a platformer. It is one of the earlier Genesis games, but keeping the arcade theme, it's Flicky. It's this little blue bird that basically the goal is kind of the screen follows like a Defender format where it repeats. And so it kind of just you get to one side of the screen and it turns back over. You're this little blue bird that needs to save little yellow chicks, and there's cats and lizards and other things. And Flicky can interact with the stage and grab something that's usually like a chair and hurl it. And really cute small sprites. The bird can jump, but he can't quite fly. So he has a little float to him when he jumps. But yeah, the goal is just to make this chain of little chicks and then get them to an exit. And then, yeah, pretty fun. Again, one that you can quickly pick up. It's a early Genesis game, and it's a lot of fun. And, a lot of fun memories of playing that game over and over.
Never heard of that game. Apparently, Flicky has a cameo in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, though, from 2007.
Yeah, he's cultural impact. He's an icon.
Who knew?
Okay, number 5. So my number 5 is Beyond Oasis, known in other parts of the world as the story of Thor, I think, which it doesn't entirely fit because it doesn't have a whole lot to do with Norse mythology. But anyway, naming conventions for games are weird. But this is one of Sega's answers to The Legend of Zelda. It was a later entry in the catalog for the Genesis, but had very high quality graphics, had like levels that were very expansive, a decent story. The game mechanics involved summoning different spirits to help you solve puzzles and defeat enemies. So there was like a fire spirit, a water spirit, one that was attached to shadows and mirrors, and there was a fourth one that I think was plants, I want to say. But yeah, some really interesting uses of them. There was a hidden area where it was like a 100-level dungeon where if you got to the end of it, you got something special. I never got to the end of it, but you could use the spirits you had in really interesting ways in combat. Like if you were fighting slimes, you could use the water spirit to like do stuff with the slimes because they were liquid. Things like if you were fighting something that was wearing armor, it was reflective. You could use the shadows and mirror spirit to do stuff with them. A lot of really interesting mechanics, and it was just a lot of fun, especially as someone who was a Sega kid, didn't have access to the Zelda games, so this was kind of eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I don't know that I know anything about that game, but those mechanics sound like they're pretty cool.
Yeah,
really interesting.
It reminds me a lot of like and I grew up with Beyond Oasis and played it a little bit. It reminds me a lot of like the Mana series too, like
yes.
both Zelda, and if you took like the Mana aspects of it, if you're familiar with like the Secret of Mana games or Mana games on Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It just didn't have the party aspect. You were just one guy for the most part. Yeah,
true.
Cool. Number 5 for me, I have a game that Justin mentioned last round, which is Phantasy Star 2, and this is definitely one I actually just replayed it. I would say it was like 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And as you said, it's a sci-fi RPG, which is a little bit kind of underused topic. And it was, you had the classic kind of top-down style walking around the overworld. Combat was pretty cool because it was like a menu-based, turn-based kind of thing where you like choose all your actions and then you hit go, and then that determines people you would fight, and then like one of the enemies would take a turn, and so things would sometimes you wouldn't get to your actions that you intended to happen. But that was pretty cool. And one of the notes I had here was it was the first 6 megabit memory cartridge game came out, so it was much larger than a lot of the other games that had come out previously that just had more substance to it. It was also really fun because you had a party of 4 characters, up to a max of 4. You didn't always have 4, but you could pick characters from a larger pool, which I think the most you get was like 7 or 8. I can't remember now off the top of my head.
Sounds right.
But you picked up to 4 characters to form your team, and it was just a really great story. The characters I felt were pretty memorable, even though there wasn't a lot of story, like backstory to them, and there wasn't like a lot of there wasn't a ton of kind of inter-character interactions through the game, but you did feel like you got to know these characters, and they were kind of unique. And it was challenging but really fun combat, and the soundtrack was pretty good as well. So I enjoyed this a lot, and I replayed it, like I said, just a few years ago. So
Well, I'm at my top 5 here, so I just cracked open a mule now to get into the serious stuff. My number 5 is Mario Paint. It's a lesser-known Japanese import on the Sega Genesis featuring a plumber who's Italian. Makes no sense. Just kidding. My top 5. I'm getting into the 5 that I probably spent the most time with, so here we go. My number 5 is Streets of Rage 3, which is just pure button mashing goodness. Our mutual friend Justin loved the Streets of Rage games. I played quite a few of them at his house back in the day, but it was always fun just because Super Nintendo, I don't feel like I played a lot of button mashers that I can really recall. Like they had Final Fight, but I didn't ever have Final Fight. Like I didn't have access to that anywhere. So like this was my primary way to like kind of continue the Double Dragon-ish genre later in life. So I couldn't name a character from this game, so there's that as well. But Streets of Rage 3 had fun with, so that's what I'm going with.
All right. I'm gonna go with Revenge of Shinobi here as my 5th game. Really good. Again, another one of the early games here for Sega Genesis. Actually didn't play. I have the cart. I love. Fun thing about Revenge of Shinobi is there's lots of revisions on the cartridge, and so Sega took a stance of asking for forgiveness as opposed to permission. So Spider-Man is in this game as a boss. I think Rambo or RoboCop, Godzilla. There's lots of characters who clearly have copyrights and licenses, and Sega was like, we're going to make so much money.
What is copyright?
Yeah. So there's like the original 1.0 game has all these characters, and then they got like sloppy, and they just like made Spider-Man a little less vibrant. And so he's still Spider-Man, but he's just a different color. Anywho, that's beside the point. It's a fun game. You get to play as a ninja. So if you like the Ninja Gaiden or Gaiden series, you get to throw shurikens. You run around and you're fighting in feudal Japan, and some really cool effects with like lightning and charging up your shurikens, hitting people with your swords, and then a lot of like Shinto spiritualistic type elements that just the game is awesome, and it really has a good atmosphere and vibe to it. So really hard, still really fun game. Revenge of Shinobi for me for 5.
I am looking up these pictures right now as we speak. This is blowing my mind. What the hell? Batman.
Oh yeah, Batman,
Spider-Man, Rocky, and then The best part was those it says were in revision 1 where they switched them all, but then like all the way down in revision 3 they were still like, Godzilla's okay.
We haven't been told no yet.
Yeah. Those people haven't caught us yet.
Oh man, the old days, the Wild West of gaming.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at number 4. So my number 4 is actually another sort of Zelda clone, Landstalker. This was a more isometric style of Zelda game. Beyond Oasis was more like top-down, where up was up, down was down, and etc. This one, Landstalker, was shifted a little bit, so everything was kind of on a diagonal, which gave it kind of a more immersive feel. Things were, paths were easier to hide, that sort of thing. But this one had a lot of heart. It's not compared to Beyond Oasis is the more technically impressive game, but there's just so much in Landstalker that, just feels right. Like the characters were a lot of fun. The puzzles actually were puzzles. There was a recurring set of villains that are just completely inept, yet they keep showing up, and every time you fight them, it's just that it's sort of like Team Rocket is blasting off again. There's like little gags like that, and it's just got a lot of personality, a lot of, as I said, heart, and it's just really well put together. Some of the jumping sections are a little wonky because, again, it's everything shifted on the diagonal, so knowing exactly where you're jumping is a little tricky sometimes, but great level design, a lot of secrets, a lot of hidden things, good art, just a really good game, and it deserves more attention than it gets.
It's fun going through his list because when we did some of the other previous gaming lists, I felt like we all had very similar games, just in different order. We have such a variety of different things. Like I've never even played that game, but a lot of these sound like they'd be enjoyable to try them at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The remainder of my list is kind of really heavily skewed one way here, but we can talk about it later. But continuing on here, number 4 for me is Shining Force 2.
Oh,
which
nice.
was
some overlap here.
It's a fantasy RPG, and similar to Justin had mentioned Shining Force 1, which it's a tactical kind of turn-based, kind of Fire Emblem-esque, for something more modern. And so all the battles were on a map that was a grid, so it wasn't like you had you had to move in boxes, and you had like a certain amount of moves each character could go. You had up to 30 different characters that you could recruit onto your team, and then you would pick then a list. I think it was 12, a team of 12 that you would go actually into battle with. And there was, kind of the typical kind of characters to pick from. You had like, human fighters, healers, mages. You had centaurs. You had birdmen. There was a phoenix in this one, and a robot, and some other kind of different unique stuff too, which is really fun. And Justin had mentioned Shining Force 1, but Shining Force 1 and 2 were very similar in very many ways. So like you mentioned, the character sprites and stuff were very vibrant and colorful, and like the whole world was really kind of, it was bright, and it like things kind of like popped out from the map easily. They didn't like, things weren't kind of like blended into each other. It was a really nice looking game to play. Again, there was some really kind of cool music in here. The fighting animations were really enjoyable. So like when you went into a battle, it would like cut to like a scene where you could, you saw your characters like fighting against each other actually. And another one of the cool parts about this was you would, when characters leveled up to a certain point, you could promote them, and they would start, their stats would start growing much faster at that point, and they would usually, not everybody, but most of them looked a lot more badass. Like after that point, their sprite would change, and their kind of their other, just the way they looked was pretty cool. So this had a great story to it. It's a lot larger than the first one that I remember. The whole map region was bigger, and they had a bunch of other little improvements as well. But yeah, Shining Force 2.
Awesome. My number 4 is the only game on my list that I did not play as a kid. I played it more recently on the Nintendo service, actually, of all places. This was a Japanese only release original, and this is called James Hetfield and the White Castle of Fear. It's about a struggling musician who forms a band and goes on the road, and they go on to take over the planet. There's a fight against a boss called Napster. That was a tough one, but they got through that one okay.
And I started writing this down. It's like, this isn't a game.
Sorry, no, I just got new glasses this past Monday. It actually says Streets of Rage. It's Streets of Rage 1, actually. So sorry about that. Same thing. Lots of punching. Next.
Right. I mean, I feel like, man, I'm getting down to it. My 4th is actually a couple of these are like slash, because I feel like they're tied for me. So I'm gonna.
The one about the musician with the top hat and the cigarette. I love that one.
That's so good. No, it's a Disney game. Disney made there were some really good Disney games on the Genesis, but I think one of my favorites.
If you say Pinocchio, so help me.
It's Pinocchio. It's Little Mermaid. No, just kidding. It's Quackshot with Donald Duck.
What?
And
Oh man,
it's such a good game. It's a platformer. Donald Duck.
So you can make up games. I can't make up games. I see what's going on.
Yeah,
I forgot about that one.
It's so good. It's really, really nice detailed sprites. I would say it's on par with Mickey Mouse Castle of Illusion, but I love the fact that you can revisit stages as you go. So there's Duckburg. You visit Transylvania. It's spooky. It's got a lot of ambience in different stages. It's got a really good soundtrack. Donald Duck shoots plungers with a gun, and he can upgrade his plungers, and then you enhance your platforming that way. You get to do some pyramids in Egypt and Cairo. Like, it's really cool, varied stages, and it's just a really fun game. There was a couple stages that are really challenging. If you think like the Donkey Kong Country Kart level is hard, there's one where you're basically on like a zip line across stages and you have to jump between different sets of chain to continue on in the platform. And so I think it was really clever, a really neat game, and that maybe I don't think it necessarily pops up time to time on top 10, but it's certainly on mine for sure.
I can tell just by looking at images that it's a fun game.
Yeah, that is a solid choice. I actually forgot about that one. Okay, top 3. So my top 3 is one that I somehow don't think has been mentioned. The first game in the series has been mentioned. The third has been mentioned. I don't think Streets of Rage 2 has come up yet. But it is similar to Sonic 2. It took everything the first game did and just made it better. A couple of recurring characters, Axel and Blaze. They do have names, Cody.
Okay.
The son of one of the other characters, Skate, who is the son of Adam, is in it. But it is just a really cool. And there's like a big wrestler guy. I don't know if he's actually connected to anybody, but
it's like the Ultimate War. Or yeah, Max, right?
Max, yes, yeah. But yeah, each of them played differently. Like Skate was, fast and didn't hit very hard, but Max was a powerhouse, but was slow as bricks. But
bricks don't move, actually.
He's very slow.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's just great stages, a lot of enemy variety, good sprite work. The soundtrack is incredible. Someone earlier I think Blue mentioned that it took a really talented composer to do better music on the Genesis than on the Super Nintendo. Yuzo Koshiro is the composer for the Streets of Rage games, and he knocked it out of the park for each one. But I honestly think the soundtrack for 2 is the absolute best. It's jazzy, it's got energy, it is just perfect. Yep. Seriously, listeners at home, if you haven't played these games, just Google go to YouTube, go to Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack. You won't regret it. It's incredible.
There's a playlist of, I don't know if you've seen it, Henry, but it's like a live concert of Yuzo Koshiro, and I believe who was the second composer on that? It was
Koshiro is the one I remember.
Yeah, Motohiro Kawashima.
Okay,
he was the first one, I think, on the second game. So they're basically just like jamming and playing their own music on, modern day computers, but like fantastic. Yeah, without a doubt. Like that's the best use of the Sega Genesis sound chip.
Yes. I'll have to check that out because I was not aware that existed, but that sounds awesome.
I'll send you the link afterwards.
Thanks.
And Cody, I'm also offended that you named Streets of Rage as your number 4, but you didn't mention that you get to like basically fight the Ultimate Warrior. Like, you love wrestling? You forgot to mention that you fight Ultimate Warrior on a beach.
You probably never got that far.
Yeah, you're probably just bad at the game.
Shame.
I didn't. The buttons were different. I didn't know how to start the game.
Lady, sorry, Brad. Go ahead.
What's the C button? I don't know.
There's 6 buttons on this thing. What the crap? Number 3 for me. I had Sonic 2.
Ooh.
Which has been mentioned a couple times already, but just for, I guess, for a real quick view, in case anybody actually doesn't know what Sonic is. So basically, it was a side-scrolling platformer, but you'd go with it really fast. You would curl up in a little ball and just zip along. As I said before, this game played like exactly the same as the first one, but they did make several improvements as Justin mentioned, like the spin dash made things much easier to get around. The level design was better so that you could actually, you could keep your momentum through the stages much easier. You didn't like smack into a wall or something because you're off like by the fraction of a whatever. And yeah, it just was it was a blast to play. Tails was introduced in this one, which was kind of cool. If you did have someone else want to play with you, they could control Tails and like collect rings and things for you. And the pinball type stages were really fun as always. And as you said, the music was really enjoyable as well. So I definitely I spent a lot of time on this one. And this was the only one the only Sonic game that I put on my list. Basically because they were all so similar. I just basically said, I'm just going to pick one of them, and this was the best one of the 3. So
I think it has the best Chaos Emerald like bonus stage out of
that was a lot of fun too. Yeah,
like the first one has the pinball kind of like rotating, but I really love the behind the view when you're like racing trying to collect rings, and you could go Super Saiyan. You basically could, if you get all the Chaos Emeralds, you could turn into Supersonic, which was a fun thing too.
It's not as fast as Sonic 2. My number 3 pick, Sonic 1.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I mean, I don't have a ton to add about this, honestly. But for me, so here's the thing: because I was so Nintendo when Sonic came out and the Genesis kind of like entered the marketplace, like he being Sonic, the actual character, was like the personification of Nintendo's enemy now. So that was like this.
I can see that.
You had like this, I don't know what you would say, like it's not tangible, but like a symbol, I guess, of like what you put your hatred towards, and you're like, who is this guy? But secretly you're kind of like, all right, this dude moves pretty fast, and he's got like a different style of platforming that's going on here, and it's a different kind of story. The stages look, vastly different than the Mario stages. I guess if you like took some of the crazier Mario stages and made them look more 3D-ish, maybe they might not be that far apart for some of the stages, but it was just so different from what I was used to. And so I think I secretly have some respect for Sonic here. So I'm going to go with the OG for number 3 for me.
Nice.
He did do what Nintendo don't.
Yeah. He did do what Nintendo don't, which is go out of business. So
they still exist. They're still making games.
Yeah,
that's true. Now they are on other systems. So there you go.
Yeah.
My third game hasn't been mentioned. Maybe it's up here because I think it's one of the best games, and maybe it'll be on your all's list. But it is made by a company who is composed of folks who got tired of making the same game for Konami, and it is Gunstar Heroes. It's a run and gun. It is by far one of the best games that Treasure has made. It was the first game that Treasure put out, and so basically this company was like, hey, this group of people are like, we're tired of making Castlevania games, we're tired of making Contra, which also sounds absurd if you think about it, but they were involved with like Bucky O'Hare on NES. Basically what Treasure was and what Gunstar Heroes was is a run-and-gun game, had a health system here, and each of the characters had a different way of firing. So instead of like power-ups that you would collect, each of your Gunstar heroes would have a different way of shooting. And so really fun bosses. Basically every stage is almost like a boss rush, and so you basically just get to the end, fight the boss, rinse and repeat, do it again. Really, really fun, fast action. And just, I think Treasure goes on to make brilliant games that people have or haven't heard of. Like Ikaruga is a really good one that was on the Dreamcast arcade. They also made Radiant Silvergun, but they also have a really obscure Ronald McDonald game that is also on the Sega Genesis. So
it's really good.
It's really good. You're like, oh, McDonald's game, this is going to be absolute shit, and it's actually quite surprisingly good. And then like some other obscure games like Mischief Makers on the Nintendo 64 was also Treasure. And I'm trying to remember, wasn't there another one? Like what's the one with the Saturn? It's another beat 'em up on Saturn. It's kind of more of a
Guardian Heroes or something.
Yeah,
like
Guardian
that?
Heroes. So
Guardian Legends, something like that. Yeah.
Treasure just needs to be mentioned because really, without Gunstar Heroes, I don't think you'd see the similar success for that team. And man, I feel like they just literally shit out gold in terms of the production value that they have in their games.
Agreed. And speaking of Treasure, my number 2 is another game of theirs, Dynamite Headdy, which is another platformer. The premise of this one is it kind of sets the stage for how weird things are going to get. So it's set in a kingdom of toys, where I think the big bad evil guy, his name is like Dark Demon or something like that. But he decides to invade and take things over, and so he starts kidnapping all of the toys to turn them into his minions. And you play as one who gets discarded because your head is loose. And so he figures, I don't want a defective minion, so he just like tosses you out, and then it's up to you to save the world. And the key point about your head being loose is you can swap out your heads for other heads. So your main one, you can like throw it and it hits people and you do damage, but you can have one that's like spikes that you can throw and hit walls and like launch yourself towards them. There's one that works like a boomerang. There's one that slows people down or puts them to sleep, and there's like a whole bunch of them. And it's just such a creative, weird, bright and colorful game that full of secrets, full of just strange characters. There's like a secret level I think you unlock at the end if you find a bunch of hidden codes throughout the regular stages that gives you a password that you have to unlock. So there's a surprising amount of depth to it, and it's just an incredible game. And further evidence that Treasure is a company that more people should be aware of, because everything they've made has been a lot of fun.
How did you all just change positions on my screen? What just happened here?
I saw that too.
Oh yeah,
I didn't do it.
Quickly muted my video because it got fuzzy, and then I turned it back. Viewers at home, this is what happened.
Gotcha.
I was like, wait, does I thought maybe the one of you like swapped positions on your screen because you liked them to be like rotating in the order that we were talking in.
We're secretly in the same house, so one of us just got up and moved to the other.
I get it. Yeah. Okay. All right, number 2 for me is sequel of one of my games I mentioned before, and that was Phantasy Star 4. So now this game played basically exactly the same way as Phantasy Star 2 did, which was kind of, so just real quick, Phantasy Star 3 was actually quite a bit different. They like the base gameplay was the same, but the look and the feel of it was kind of actually vastly different. But Phantasy Star 4 came back and was very, very similar to Phantasy Star 2. But they did have a lot of improvements. The graphics were a little bit cleaner, and the story was a lot more fleshed out. There was more dialogue and just more background to the world. They had a lot of mechanics which were really cool, including combo attacks, which was really amazing. it'd be pretty tough to find them just kind of by accident. So a lot of these you had to, use a guide or something to do them. But essentially, if you set up your team so that, say, for example, one character uses a fire-based attack, and then the very next character you have uses a wind-based attack, they would actually combine, and you'd get like this flaming tornado attack. And I think you could actually get, was the max combo like all 5 characters? I don't remember if it was 5 or it was like 3. I'm not remembering that now, but
I think
you could
some
get
that
like
actually incorporated all
multiple
of them.
characters into a combo attack, which is pretty amazing. It also had macros, which was great. So you could just, if you like wanted just all 5 of your characters to just use just a basic attack that round, you would hit the macro you created to do that, and it would just do it. You didn't have to go in and select the action for every
menus,
single
yeah.
character, which was amazing addition. And as I've been saying, this one had a 5-character battle team, which the original game had a 4-character team. But what was interesting was, as you played through, you never had more than 5 characters on your team. Characters would leave and go off and do other things, or you would gain and lose characters as you progress through the story. So you never had extra people to pick from. But it was interesting how that, it kind of changed out on its, because it's automatically on its own. But yeah, I just, these, as I said, these two were very similar to Phantasy Star 2, which I enjoyed greatly. But this one I had some improvements, which put up here number 2 for me.
Good choice.
Likes those games, I tell you. All right, my number 2. I can't believe you started writing down James Hetfield and the White Castle of Fear as a real game. But anyway, my number 2 has been mentioned already, so look out for bonus points here, ladies and gents. It's Streets of Rage Part 2. I got all 3 of them in my top 5 just because I liked beating the hell out of things. Insert joke. But anyway, yeah, no, it's just fun. Like, again, it's a good, fun smasher. It's like arcade style, but it was at home. That was one of those games that truly felt like you were playing an arcade game, but you were at home on the Genesis, which was awesome. And I had forgot about the soundtrack until you guys mentioned that, but I do recall that it had some pretty jazzy little tunes there as you were going through. And I always love those like typical like side-scrolling beat 'em up games too that have like the ridiculous stereotype bad guys, like, and at this point they've done all of the like weird ones even too. So like at this point you're like, oh, dude's got a boombox but he's wearing a tutu and he's on roller skates. Seen it, let's beat him up. So that's kind of fun too. But that's my number 2.
Nice choice. Yep. I feel like this is one that hasn't been on the list. It got in the honorable mentions, which is surprising to me, but it is the Sonic game that I actually played the most, and probably the first one I beat and in its entirety, like got the KSM Worlds, probably because of the fact that it has a save feature. So I think Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and then / Knuckles, because I think you'd be remiss not to mention Sonic and Knuckles. You could actually, if you have just pause, I'm going to go on a quick tangent, listeners. If you have the original Sega Genesis 1, and if you had the Sega CD 1, it would stack underneath, and then you put the 32X on top of it, and then you put Sonic Knuckles on top of the 32X, and then you put the Game Genie on top of that, and then you put Sonic 3 on top of that, but then you put a Game Cleaner on top of that. And basically, you can make this huge tower power, is what I'm saying. And
so you form Exodia and win the game.
Yeah, you basically just turn in your Sega Genesis into a great, Ronin or Zoids.
Yeah.
Or
Voltron.
But anyway, I love Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Little known fact, maybe it's urban legend or a rumor, but evidently Michael Jackson may have worked on producing the soundtrack there. It's like really just loosely tangential. It's like if it's been on, like, for example, Brett's background is this Mega Drive Classics. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was missing from that compilation, possibly due to the estate of Michael Jackson not renewing the license. But it was on the previous Xbox 360 and PlayStation Sonic Mega Drive hits or whatnot, or Ultimate Hits. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3 had you basically could run through with Tails again. Sonic and Knuckles, that you play any of the base Sonic the Hedgehog games as Knuckles.
and they both came out in their own standalone games. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is awesome. Also, really iconic soundtrack. Could go supersonic again as soon as you got the Chaos Emeralds. And yeah, I love that one. That's the Sonic game that I beat to death along with Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Nice. Okay, number ones. Drum roll. No, mine has already been mentioned. Gunstar Heroes, and for good reason. This game is just absolutely incredible, and Blue didn't even mention like some of the best parts of it.
Oh,
like,
throw some shade, boy.
Well, no. I mean, yes, each character does control a bit differently. Like one of them, you run and gun, and if you press like up and to the right when you're running, you'll just keep running forward, but you'll shoot up and to the right. The other one will pause in place, and you can like aim as you go. But there are 4 different weapons in the game. There's like a straight shot, a homing shot, a laser, and a flamethrower. But you can combine, you can collect essentially 2 weapons at once, and depending on which weapons you pick up, that will change what your gun does. So you can double up on the flamethrower and just have your flame shoot further, or you can hit the flamethrower into homing bullets, and you'll have flames that will chase everyone across the screen and do continuous damage. Or you could have like the flamethrower and the laser and have a really short range but incredibly powerful like plasma cutter, basically. And that was a lot of the fun of the game, was finding combinations that worked for each situation. And it really added a lot of strategy, a lot of replayability. And on top of that, it wasn't just gunplay. You could actually like do melee moves with your enemies. You could pick them up and throw them. You could like slide through them and knock them down that way. There was just so much that this game had to offer. And I mean, the levels were huge. The bosses were huge. There was one boss where you didn't fight him directly, but he made you like throw this giant die and move across a game board that would determine what you did at any particular point of the fight. I mean, it was just relentlessly creative and a ton of fun to play and hard as nails. I mean, all things that I respect and enjoy in games today. Gunstar Heroes is an all-time classic, and if you haven't played it, you're missing out.
Speaking of that, Gunstar Heroes is basically in every single top 5 list that I've ever seen, but is not on mine because I never played it.
Scratch that notch out of the list here, Pilot.
What is on my list is it's one of my favorite games of all time, and one that I would pick up and play right now after we finish this podcast if I wanted to. Shining Force 1 is a game that I just love to death. It, as we kind of mentioned a couple times before, Shining Force 1 and 2 were basically the same game, just with a different story and different characters. They played exactly the same. They were both very enjoyable in that way. And while Shining Force 2 actually did make some improvements to the game, with kind of like the expanded map and a bit more of an expanded story and a little bit more like Shining Force 1, you were basically locked into a kind of a linear path. Shining Force 2, you got to a point where you could go around the map and pick your battles. But what made Shining Force 1 better for me over 2 was, I thought the story, just the overall story, was better. The final battle was more trickier. It took a little more strategy and was really fun. And the ending is like really dramatic and moving. It's was pretty kind of, for me at that time, was probably one of the first games where you get to the end and you're like, we beat the game, but I'm not sure that I won the game, because the way the game ends, you're like, oh no, this was my guy. And not to spoil a 30-year-old game for anybody, but it really is. It's the masterpiece of RPGs, as far as I'm concerned. and it had one of the more fun characters. This character was named Jogurt. Was essentially it's like a hamster wearing a helmet, and was completely useless in the game. Like it would never do like more than 1 damage, and even if you would like really kind of like pick and choose your way like through battles, and like it's like you could knock down an enemy to like 1 HP with somebody like one of your strong ones, and come in with Jogurt and like knock him out and kill him. Like even if you like managed to level him up, you would, if you got to the point where you could promote him, it didn't change at all. It's like completely pointless. I actually did manage to like get to that point once, but just a really kind of goofy, and it was a character that you actually had to like do something special to even get him.
Mhm.
But it was just this joke character that like it was not useful at all, but just funny. But yeah, the Shining Force 1, I could play that at any point. Love it.
Jogurt's great. He's got a football helmet. It's pretty awesome. We're looking at this.
Then there was the jellyfish you could hatch from an egg if you searched a certain area that, you know, floated in the air and cast ice magic. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a weird game, but a good one.
All right, my number 1 game.
Oh my goodness, here it comes. What
You
what
know
we're
nothing.
about to write down.
Here you go.
Some elaborate ruse.
First I tricked these 3 into doing a Sega Genesis podcast so I could talk about this game.
Oh no.
That's right.
By you, Billy.
If I saw a cheap Sega Genesis and this game, I would consider purchasing them so I could play this game again. This game combines all the elements that you want in a perfect game.
Buster Douglas boxing. Got it. Yep. Got it.
Got it.
All right. My number 1 is
Yep. Buster Douglas boxing. No, just kidding. It is Brett may have not known how influential that camping tent was that he had at the campground. However,
Where's this story going?
from this comes my number 1 all-time Sega Genesis game, which I played quite a bit with him and others in the tent, and would easily again go pick up this game if I had it here right after this podcast and play it again. This is all of the fun elements of Tetris mixed with real-time strategy, mixed with player versus player, mixed with player versus computer. And this is Rampart, the best Sega Genesis game of all time, bar none. This game is amazing. It's got like a panic sense to it because you're working against the clock. You got people attacking each other. You're trying to rebuild your castle with the pieces they give you. Try to surround more castles so you can expand your territory each round. Shoot with your cannons to decide where you want to put your cannons. I don't know how many games of this we played. That one time we were camping there. I should mention Brett and I were not camping together either. We were just happened to be there the same week.
Yeah.
But he showed me this game and I was like, this game is amazing. Oh my God. And I see there is ports of it for like 10 different systems, but not anything as of real recently, because I was hoping maybe I could find it on like looks like maybe the GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox gen. There is a version on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but that seems to be the latest one that has come out. But yeah, this game is just super fun. Oh my gosh, just to like get the wrong piece and be like, no shit, no, I put it in the wrong spot. No, damn it. I got to make a full circle or you lose your territory. And then kind of like, especially like there's a 3-player option, I think, too. So you could like gang up on somebody if they were like ahead and try to like bring that person back down a little bit so the other 2 people could catch up a little bit. I don't even remember how the games ended, if it was time or if it was actually till somebody lost, but I know we played quite a bit of it that week that we were there. And this is bar none. Like when I started this list, I was like, Rampart's 1, and then I researched the other 900 games that came out for the Genesis. That's my number 1 all time, people.
That was the worst when you were trying to build your castle and you didn't complete the wall, and you're like, well, I'm screwed.
That's like I've only played a limited, but I do remember that I love tower defense games, and I feel like that is really the first one that ever existed.
Yeah, it says in the Wikipedia entry it was like 10 years before the first tower defense games came out.
Yeah.
Oh,
good choice. I feel like somebody had it as an honorable mention too, so I want to
did.
make sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, okay. I was out of the room at that point. I missed that. Dang it.
I feel like
that's why I was like, is it his number 1? Is it his number 1?
But it does have some weight because I'm trying to. listeners, I've been tallying, but I'm just trying to figure out with weighted averages here. I'm not going to go that granular. But if somebody has it as an honorable mention and a number one, that should be added to the list as far as how many to a tally. I would say my number one is a tie, but since it's
wait a second.
it's a theme
That
here.
makes 11.
1.5.
I'm just going to stick with Streets of Rage 2. It's by far, I love one. I think one soundtrack is, that's the first Streets of Rage game that I ever played. It is the first one that came out. But Streets of Rage 2, man, I just play it to ad nauseum. It is similarly like how Cody loves Rampart. I could just fire up Streets of Rage 2 and probably blaze through it. No pun intended. And it's just so good. I mean, I love some other things that haven't been mentioned about it. Like you can hear basically Axel, if you do his toward punch move, he says the Japanese name of the game, which is bare knuckle. It's a lot of like fun. I think Yuzo Koshiro just nailed that soundtrack. I like the aspect that it's a redone special system as opposed to cops rolling up and shooting like either a machine gun or a rocket launcher in the first one. Really relies on elements with some balancing of how you manage your health and try not to get hit, which is important, but you can't use special if you're down to like your last elements of health. So you have to, manage your resources while also interacting on the plane while you're beating people up. And I feel like that Streets of Rage 2 is probably a reason why Streets of Rage 3 happened. And then, decades later, we've got Streets of Rage 4, which is also awesome and available on like PS4, Switch, Xbox. Fantastic game. I love Streets of Rage 2. So guys, if you want, feel free to like have some more banter. I'm going to tally here. I have some quick napkin math. I have some commonalities if you want to hear what games ended up being synonymous in our lists.
Good old napkin math.
Yeah.
Best math.
Yeah.
I guess as we were talking, there's one that I always enjoyed, but I don't know if I'd put it necessarily in my top anything, but Zombies Ate My Neighbors, where it's like every horror movie from the 80s kind of crammed together into one thing, and you're a teenager trying to save your neighborhood from zombies or like a serial killer or vampires or and it was fun, but in a way it was almost too long, I think, because it had just 60 levels or something like that. It was something stupid,
pretty long.
Yeah,
that's what she said.
Oh, come on now.
But
Why you gotta do that?
Here's the quick count. So if we start at the honorable mentions, Rampart, 2 votes for it. Castlevania and Contra both have 2 votes for it. When we start getting into lists, here's games that had 2 votes as well. Road Rash 2, Altered Beast, Toe Jam and Earl, Mortal Kombat 2, Shining Force 2, and then Phantasy Star 4/2. Like I think just
also Gunstar Heroes. Did you say Gunstar Heroes?
Gunstar Heroes did actually, I had 2, but then Brett pulled a fakie on me and did not say it was. So there was briefly a third notch, but
okay.
And then in terms of 3 votes, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came up for 3 of the 4. And then one that is on all of our lists is Streets of Rage 2. So that may be the best Genesis game that has ever been made.
Streets of Rage 2 is our winner.
I think so.
I'm okay with that.
I mean, that's pretty solid. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, yeah, it's an incredible game, especially if you're playing with a friend. I mean, it's just a good old-fashioned beat 'em up, and yeah, it's a blast.
I mean, who had it fairly low on their list? Because that's who we need to make fun of. I mean, just double check.
I had it as an honorable mention.
Oh my God, that's even worse, Brett.
I had it higher.
It was funny. Like I mentioned it before that like the top half of my list was really kind of weighted a certain way. And what's funny is that the Genesis is when I really started getting into the RPGs. Like 4 of my top 5 were all RPGs, and it's like a funny story because I actually, I had Nintendo Power back in the day, and I actually wrote a letter to Nintendo. I was like, man, I really love these Sega RPGs. Why aren't you making more RPGs? And like looking back on it now, it's just completely short-sighted and stupid because they had plenty of RPGs. I just didn't know about them, despite having this magazine that told me about them. So
That's funny.
But yeah,
I want to find a copy of that issue where you asked that question. Have you signed it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think it was in the magazine, but
They're probably like, who is this kid?
I got 2 updates quick. One, since I spoke last here on this podcast, I just purchased a copy of Rampage that's coming in the mail. So there's that.
You mean Rampart?
Yeah. Oh, yes, actually, I might have both. Actually, it's the Midway Treasure Collection, so I actually might have both on it. But yes, Rampart. Yes, sorry. They had somebody was selling disc only on eBay, so I snatched that up. So that'll be here in a little bit. So we will play some Rampage after all. Hopefully, it's the right version that I like. But anyway, and secondly, we got to give a shout out to Blue, who bought a house tonight.
Woo!
congratulations.
It's got a
Yay.
basement, so we can put Justine's like, we'll put all your games in there. I'm like, yeah. I turned it into a den, and then we can get sloppy and fall up the stairs after playing one too many rounds of Rampart.
Hey, yes, or Rampage, whatever it is, or Streets of Rampage, or Road Rash Page, or Road Rage Pash Streets.
Which Rampage
Ooh.
game is it you like?
You
You said it was a disc one. For what console?
It's for the GameCube, but it's the like arcade classics collection from
Okay.
Midway.
See. Yep.
So
Gotcha.
hopefully
Okay, you
it's
mentioned that part.
roughly the same. We'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe I can make my kids play it with me. Oh, your castle broke. Sorry.
Yeah.
No
That'll-
mercy.
That'll last a whole day of playing it.
But thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not an easy feat to accomplish in this day and age.
Oh no, I am just grateful to be back in Michigan, and then we can all be united. I got Cody excited because it was
Yeah, you did.
Did you move to Illinois? And I said no, but we'll be on like Illinois Street. Is that good enough?
Oh.
It's
No.
not.
You're closer to Brett than anybody now. Well, actually, it might be close. Actually, you might still be closer to Joe than Brett, but it's close.
Yeah.
Are you still like far, like the northern lower, Brett?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up in the corner there.
Oh, in the corner. I'll be in the other corner, and then Joe's in the other corner. There's only one corner left.
And I claim it because I'm way up north in no man's land.
Yeah, that is the corner.
Yeah, it is the corner. All right.
Well, anything to bring us home here?
Kaboom. 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 Kaboom.
Yeah. So thanks, guys. It's been a lovely evening, and if you don't like our list, then you can disagree with us if you want, because that's the
Share
name
some of
the
your
show.
favorites.
Yeah, check us
Yeah.
out on Facebook and TikTok and all those places.
Where you
MySpace.
consume your podcasts.
Yeah. All those
Right.
things.
So do we need to
Alrighty.
sing us out, or
I
was
think
the
somebody technically
Chemical
has
Zone
the Twitter
theme?
account, but I don't know who has that. Joe, maybe? I don't know who has Twitter. Somebody does. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway,
We own the Gmail. That's all that's important. So there we go.
yeah.
All right.
All right. Blue, you're leading us in a song?
Oh, friends.
Friends.
Occasionally.
Keep it
not
not
disagree.
occasionally not disagree.
I'm
Street Rage
surprised.
characters don't have names.
Isn't there a Three Ninjas game? There's a Three Ninjas game that came out on Genesis.
Three Ninjas Kick Back. I made that joke in the man group, which you should attend sometime. But that was the first one. That was the first one listed alphabetically, and I was like, "That's it. I'm done. It's not gonna get better than that."
Sorry, I'm bad at social medias.
Blue's been moving, so our inside joke has been we put a wanted poster of a missing kid up on our Facebook group, which he didn't see forever, so it didn't really work. But
I'm gonna go look at it now.
we had a good laugh about it, so there we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right. Take
Well,
care,
thanks, y'all.
everyone.
Yep, take care.
All right. Good night.